So should we turn the darn?
Are you the first? No. See if it stays on. I'll do that.
We can wait and do it at a certain point. Because this looks like this is asleep too. Oh no, there it is. Oh, there. And we're on.
See if it stays on.
A friend who sold a house in Africa. I said, you had a nice house. What did they do? They said, I said, you're kidding. He said, no. That's what they did. He had like a one.
Good morning. I'd like to welcome everybody to the Board of Supervisors meeting for February 18th. If you will stand with me, I'll ask Supervisor Barrios to lead us in the pledge.
Thank you. Ready, salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
May I have a motion to acknowledge the certificate of posting?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Passes 5-0. We'll move on to public comment. This is the time for the members of the public to address the board on any item not appearing on the agenda, and you will be limited to 3 minutes.
Marvin Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, board members. Supervisor Barros, I did not get a chance to say good morning to you a moment ago, so I'll do that now. Yeah, good morning. I made the mistake of going to a Monterey Bay Unified Air Pollution Control District meeting. Man, they have a nice
Marvin,
building.
I'd like to thank you for that.
Man, they have a nice building. And I was going to tell you some of the things that they have in store for you, but after Friday's paper came out, Freelance had an article in there from the Bureau of Land Management, so I'm changing topics. I'll be back to this one in a couple of weeks. Remember those maps I gave you of the United States, of California and Nevada? About half of it colored red, half of it white, green, whatever. The red areas being restricted use for people. I noticed in the Freelance that the Bureau of Land Management has finally made it official that you don't have Clear Creek recreational area anymore. They've painted it red on that map, and that man, they're coming for you between the Rangeland Heritage, between the Bureau of Land Management, between the Corps of Engineers. They're going to get it. They're going to make half this country off limits to us. Well, I'll be back to the Monterey Bay Air Pollution District in a couple of weeks. Thank you for your time.
I look forward to it, Marvin. Anyone else from the public would like to address?
Not bringing up the agenda.
Seeing none, we'll move on to department heads.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, we do have a few announcements this morning. One is we wanted to let the public as well as the board know that the building across the street, the new Superior Courthouse, as of a couple of weeks ago, has not received final permit yet, but they do plan to receive the final permit soon. And their scheduled opening is going to be Monday, March 17th, 2014. So I want to make sure the board and the public is aware of that. The other item that we have is we have a new employee in administration. She will be replacing Janelle Cox. She's been working with us for many years. Her name is Sarah Fontanez. If you don't know if you want to stand up. And she'll be working with the Public Works, in essence, the Parks and Rec Commission, and helping us out in the administration office as well. So we welcome her and look forward to her working with us. Those are the two announcements that I have. I don't believe anybody else has any other announcements.
Okay. We'll move on to board announcements. Supervisor Rivas. Okay. Supervisor Dela Cruz.
Just one announcement. Just want to wish my wife happy 25th anniversary today. So that's all.
Congratulations.
I asked the same question.
I could see why you're happy.
Too much information, Anthony.
Supervisor
Patello?
Patello, thank you. Yeah, I was thinking of the other thing. I was still.
I didn't have anything until that moment, but congratulations, Supervisor De La Cruz. That's something to be proud of. That's what you always hope for. Have a happy marriage.
Well,
Good
my
for
dad,
you.
my dad and my mom were 69 years together.
That's great.
That is something to be proud of.
I hope it runs in the family.
I hope she got a medal.
17 of us kids.
Supervisor Barrios.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I don't know when Janelle's last day is going to be, but I want to thank her for all the work that she has done for this board, and I hope that we can formally recognize and thank her for all her contribution to San Benito County, and welcome to her replacement. I have only one announcement. I sit on the Pajaro River Watershed Flood Prevention Authority, and they completed the San Benito River study that they were doing and have been doing for the last year. And they have determined that this is really nothing new, but it was something that I need to share with you, that the San Benito River contributes the majority of the sand and gravel load over time, 78 to 86%, that goes into the Pajaro River. A large fraction of this load, 40%, may be temporarily stored in the lower Pajaro River upstream of Chittenden Pass. San Benito River contributes 593,000 tons of sand and gravel over a 22-year period, and that is from 1989 to 2010 hydrograph. The bench excavation plan has removed 322,000 yards, which is equivalent to 15 years of cumulative core sediment delivery from the San Benito River. And some of the solutions may be to decrease the erosion in the upper reaches or increase the deposition storage in the lower reaches, if that is feasible. So there will be a plan that will be presented in the near future to the Pajaro River Watershed Flood Prevention Authority, and I will share that with the board at a future date. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
The only announcements I have is that piggybacking off of Dr. Jones' comments, we are watching this Clear Creek and BLM development. We have supported Congressman Farr's bill. It was H.R. 1776. I don't know if it still has the same number, which would turn Clear Creek back into a recreational area as opposed to a, hands-off area. So we are monitoring it, and we're staying on top of that. And the only thing I can one-up Supervisor De La Cruz, a couple Fridays back, my wife and I celebrated our 39th anniversary, and we had a wonderful day babysitting 3 of our grandchildren, 2 of which spent the night with us.
Can't wait to get to that point.
So with that, we'll move on to the consent agenda. I've had requests to pull items 1, 13, and 14. Is there any other item that the board would like to pull?
13 and 14.
Is there anything from the members of the public that would like to pull? With that, would entertain a motion to approve the agenda consent?
Move to approve the amended consent agenda.
Okay, we have a first and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Passes 5-0. Item number 1. Agenda number 1. Joe Paul is not here.
He was scheduled to be here, and he is here now. That's the beauty of the streaming live.
Who pulled that, Mr. Chair?
It was pulled from the public.
Oh, from the public.
Good morning, Chair, Board of Supervisors. Joe Paul Gonzalez, County Auditor. The item before you is a item that's a request for an exemption of the county's personnel policy rule that requires that no temporary employees be given any sort of benefits. Unfortunately, it's difficult to find employees who have governmental experience without having been, or our current CalPERS members. So the request is that the board exempt for the ERP project only the hiring of temporary employees, that the board allow that the hiring of temporary employees include giving CalPERS benefits to these employees, which is a requirement under retirement law, that if you hire any CalPERS members at any time, we have to continually pay for their retirement benefits at the employer side only, which is does not include the 7% portion of CalPERS, which is the employee side. That would be a deduction to the employee.
Is there any questions from a member of the board? Supervisor Patello?
So, what you're saying is that we're trying to, the agenda item is to, exempt paying the retirement, and you're saying that we need to.
No, the agenda item is is for the board to give blanket approval to hire temp employees for the ERP project only, and the blanket approval is to go ahead and hire these employees and pay the CalPERS benefits
Right, okay.
on their behalf. And as I mentioned, the reason why this was brought up is because we've interviewed several candidates, and the most qualified candidates for the temporary positions were people that have already worked in government, and they understand what they're doing, and so the training, the learning curve is much much flatter.
Mr. Chair?
Supervisor Rivas?
So if you can help to clarify for me, so aren't there rules as far as, I'm assuming these people that you've interviewed, I'm not sure if they're retired or not, but I'm assuming they're vested in CalPERS already. And so if we hire them as temp employees, because they have that time with CalPERS, is it just a preference, for them because they want to have CalPERS and they want to accept a temporary job?
Well, it's actually one of the statutes in retirement law that if we're a CalPERS agency and we hire a member, that we are required to pay for that member's, at least the employer portion of that member's benefit. Even if the positions are not permanent positions, this is a as I said, it's a statute that we have to follow.
Okay.
Supervisor De La Cruz?
Thank you. Joe, how much time will positions fill? is it a 2-month job? Is it 3 months, 6 months?
Well, we still have to follow all the CalPERS, rules. And if, for example, a temporary employee cannot work more than 960 hours in a fiscal year. So we can't exceed that because they're temporary employees. If and retirees, there's new new conditions of which retirees can be hired back.
We had some real bad experiences in the past with retiree employees, temp employees, and I'm just hesitant to vote on this because of that nature. There's no way you could have found someone else to do this job that didn't have any ties to the purse.
Well, what I'm looking for is someone who can step into the shoes of our current employees and do the current employees' work. Because the goal in the ERP project is that the current employees will actually do the installation of the new program, which, depending on what phase it is, because this is a phased approach to this installation, is going to take, probably a year to install and about another year to, get all the bugs out. So within this time period, we're going to have a need for current employees to be relieved of the regular duties, so that, or at least partially, so that they can spend the time on the new system, learning the new system, and being the trainer for any other employees throughout the county. So it's called the train-the-trainer strategy for, the training strategy for this ERP installation.
So by suspending this rule, temporary rule, you're bringing in temporary employees to backfill those positions.
That's right.
That those individuals right now that we have are needed at a different set of skills.
That's right.
And we just can't hire out of, Infinity, Manpower, Cali Services, just those kind of agencies that come in and provide that backfill?
Well, we haven't taken that approach. We haven't gone outside, to a service. The approach that we've taken is that we've hired, we've recruited for various positions over the past, 2 years. So we have a pool of applications out there where, like, the second or third person that was not hired is still, is available for employment, and they've been interviewed. They were good. They passed tests. They were able to get this close to being hired, but were not hired. I'm looking at people who have already been tested and who have shown a proficiency, to, for example, using Excel, using Word. Those are Microsoft modules that are needed in order to perform the current work that the employees do in the auditor's office.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I think, Joe Paul, I think one of the issues for you, if you hire someone, that doesn't have the experience, then you're just going to have to spend the time training them, and the people that you want to pull off and learn the new system won't be available to learn the new system because they're going to be training these other people, correct?
It's going to take a while for them to catch up to speed even on the old system.
Yeah.
But that learning curve will not be as great with someone who's already had governmental experience in payroll, which is, highly complex. It takes a long time to learn the payroll. And that's why we're looking to hire someone now, so that that learning curve is being addressed right now before we initiate the HR payroll module,
Okay.
which is coming in just a couple of short months.
Yeah, and then I think that the other thing that this board wants to make sure of is that we have learned from our previous mistakes, and we won't duplicate those mistakes in this process.
That is exactly why I brought this item before you today, is that if we are paying for the CalPERS benefit, which is required under statute, we're complying with CalPERS. We're doing what we're supposed to be doing, and we're not exposing ourselves to any additional risk.
Mr. Chair?
So, if the board approves this waiver, anyone that works or has CalPERS vested time that comes in and does temporary work, they're not adding time to it, right? Or they are adding time and we'll be paying into it?
Yes, if they're a current CalPERS member, the payments that we're making add to the member's service credit. If they're not a CalPERS member, of course, we're going to limit the employee to having no CalPERS benefits. We're not going to, give them additional benefits.
Supervisor Barrett?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, thank you so much. We have made a commitment pretty much as a board that this system is a priority for us. We know how critical it is, how important it is. And then at the same time, we expect the level of service in your department to continue with minimal interruption. You've got timelines, you've got deadlines, you've got reporting and all of that. So it's important to me, I will support it because it is important to me that we get the most experienced individuals in there while all this is going into, while the transition is happening with a minimal amount of learning curve. So I think this is a critical move that we need to move forward with.
In my discussions with our CAO, Ray asked me to put this item together because he understands the needs of the ERP system. The train has left the station with the ERP. We're in the throes of at this time of the installation of the financial system, and there's going to be a lot of work ahead of us, and there has been already a lot of work getting to this point. And in order to ensure that this ERP installation is not a failure, we need to ensure that we give the adequate resources to the project. And this is one of those things that I believe that hiring people who have some experience, some governmental experience, understand, for example, what an FLSA hour is, what that means as far as for what it means for overtime, is kind of an important thing for to know if you're going to be handling the county's payroll system.
Mr. Chair, if I may?
Yes, sir.
I want to remind the board that a few of those issues that Supervisor De La Cruz brought up, those real issues, were because we weren't dealing with CalPERS. We weren't paying the CalPERS. The employer is part of that CalPERS. So we kind of had a gotcha at the end when we realized, uh-oh, wait a minute. So this really, we want to eliminate that issue, especially just during this critical time of the ERP system rollout.
Okay. Do we have any speaker cards?
Yes, we do. Marty Richmond?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Marty Richmond from Hollister. I certainly support the ERP system. I think during your retreat, I mentioned it many times. And I do think you need experienced personnel, and I understand exactly what you're doing with the shift. And Joe Paul is often, I often make public information requests of his office, and he's always been good about filling them. And I understand that takes time away from their regular jobs, and they do it. They often have to do that, plug it in somewhere because they have time limits, and they've always been cooperative. So I do think you need the personnel. There's no question about that. I do have some concerns, however, and I just want to get those out of the way. First of all, I think you ought to get a dollar figure, at least some estimate, so we have some idea. I mean, after all, we're talking about you will be paying people X percent more, whatever half the contribution is, and you have some idea how many people it is. And you know, I'm not one to say, okay, let's hold them to the buck, but let's get some idea of what we're in for here, as far as the difference, what difference that makes on what we would pay otherwise and what it is. So at least you know what you're paying for the experience. I am also, my biggest concern is the one that several of you brought up a couple of times. And although I agree with CAO Espinosa that some of them were because we didn't pay anything, but as you well know, others were because we had people working too long, and all of a sudden they found out they were a full-time employee when they weren't supposed to be. And we were supposed to put in some stopgap measures to make sure that never happened again. They were going to sign papers and so forth. And so my concern would be to make absolutely sure that we do not take on some long-term commitment that we don't realize. In other words, if some person gets to tack on 2 years worth of CalPERS for the rest of their life because they work here, that we're not stuck with the 2 years of CalPERS. And apparently that's happened at LAFCO before. Somebody, that was their last job. They retired out of there, and because they retired out of there, we got stuck with the lifetime CalPERS even though they only worked here a little while. Also concerning your the burden you carry on OPEB, I hate to bring it up again, you're beaten to death with it, but also that we don't wind up paying OPEB on people who say, okay, I've worked for you now and that's my last job and I'm out of here and you owe me a lifetime worth of health care. I don't pretend to be an expert on CalPERS. Maybe there are some experts around. So I don't know if what I'm talking about is reasonable. I do know it's reasonable to get a dollar figure, and I would like somebody else to look into the rest of it. Thank you for your time.
Supervisor Rivas?
Yeah, you know, I agree with all that's been said, you know, as far as all of you up here, but at the same time, yeah, I'm uneasy about this item because of the comments that were just stated. I mean, this essentially is a blank check. I know that the agenda report states that there's going to be no annual cost, that this item, it's in our budget, but what does that mean? I mean, obviously there will be a cost to our budget if we're paying into this PERS. So, I mean, and so I guess, you know, I'm not going to approve this item today until we have that information. I think that we need that information to see how much it's going to cost moving forward. Should we move this item? Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Because it is open to the public, let me go ahead and have Dr. Jones speak.
Ready?
Yep.
2 quick ones. What's ERP? Second one, if you had contract employees, not temporary employees, would you get around this problem? Thank you.
And I was wondering if Joe Paul needed to explain the ERP.
I apologize for that. In the report, ERP system is an enterprise resource planning system. It is basically a financial system, but it's much more robust than just a regular general ledger system. It has the ability to pull data out in a such that, you know, you're actually getting management information. So it's quite a bit more than our current financial system that we have right now with SunGard Bitech. With regard to the costs, these, you know, as you know, the employer share of CalPERS is slightly over 13%. So that's the amount of cost that's added to the, you know, to the payroll. So if a person's earning you know, $20 an hour, 13% is $2.60, it adds to the hourly rate. As I mentioned in the report, all of these costs are budgeted. We've included in our ERP budget, so we're limited to the amounts that the board has already approved. We cannot exceed that. With regard to a comment that was made, if a person retires from the county and that worked, let's say 20 years at Monterey County, they're also a CalPERS agency, and they worked a year here. The amount, the way that the retirement is calculated in this county is that the highest 3 years, and they don't have to be consecutive years, of salary is what retirement is based on. And so it was 1 year here. It may be the basis for their compensation in retirement, or it may not be. It depends if it's higher or lower. But in all cases, the years that correspond to the agencies that hired them, those they basically they owe that proportion to the employees. We don't pay for 21 years of CalPERS. We pay for the 1 year of CalPERS that they worked here, plus whatever the changes are in the actuarial amounts for that correspond to that 1 year.
Okay, before I bring it back to this board and the rest of the staff, I want to make sure, is there anybody else from the public that would like to address this item? Seeing none, I'm going to go to our CAO and then Supervisor Patella.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, and just for clarity to the board, is that in 2013, June during the budget hearings, the board approved this project. And in this project includes part-time help, contracts, hardware, software purchase for the project. So that number, we cannot exceed that number, and that's what's going to happen here. This part-time help, the help that we're requesting of your board, the dollar figures are not going to, we cannot go over that figure. Just want to make sure the board's aware of that. If so, we have to come back to the board and request that. But as of now, we're not going to go over.
What did, Mr. Chair?
Okay, Supervisor Patella.
Yeah, I was trying to make that point as well in the last sentence of the background information. In all cases, this waiver shall not permit the exceeding of the capital project and departmental budgetary expenditure appropriations, and that's a key. We spent a lot of time on this issue at our retreat. It's a very high priority, project countywide, and it has to get done. And I could see where the training process and implementation of the system is to take our regular employees away from their daily work, which are overstrapped already, and so I could see where temporary employees are, would be needed, but I'm sure all of us are very sensitive as far as not running up our, long-term costs with temporary employees. But I think as long as we stay within the budget confinements, and also I as one supervisor, and maybe nobody will agree with me with this, but this is such an important system that we have to put in place. We should have done years ago. Even if we take a half a day or something out of a week where we just shut our doors to the public in certain offices and put a sign out and say, we have to have some in-house work that needs to be done, and so we could focus on implementation, that's another option.
Well, it would be if I was at full staff. However, I have not been able to fill the positions that I currently have available to fill. And so, because of that limitation and because of that salary savings from not filling those positions, I'm able to come to you today and say, okay, I'd like to propose this as an alternative for not having filled these positions. I have these savings, and I can, within the budget constraints, I can pay for the additional costs of hiring a CalPERS member as a temporary employee.
If I could maintain the floor, Mr. Chairman, from my perspective, and it's not, just your department, it's a number of departments, and as we talked about at the retreat, meeting that timeline, I think it's very, very important that I almost don't care how you do it as long as you maintain your timeline. Thank you.
Supervisor De La Cruz?
Yeah, two things. So first, Ray, when we approved the budget, did it also include that we were going to temporary relieve the requirements on temporary employees? Was that discussed during the budget process?
In the CIP, we had, we actually, it had a dollar figure and where the funds were coming from.
Right.
And that was approved. The details of that, actually at January of 2000, let me think here, when we're getting, in 2013, I believe it was, that actually outlined what everything was going to be for that CIP. So that included the hardware, the software, everything at
Did
that
it
point.
include that we were going to bring in temporary employees that were going to cost us PERS add-ons?
I can look that up for you right now.
I don't remember that discussion.
Well, the backfill plan has always been part of the CIP project because our consultant, Wildam Consulting, has, impressed that upon us just about daily, that the project is not a success by using existing employees, especially our aggressive timeline.
So
We plan on going, converting over the financial system July 1st.
So, Joe, let me just one more time, and I'm ready to move for the board to make a motion, Mr. Chair. So you have current employees right now that are going to be moving to this new system, and then we're going to backfill those positions with temporary employees. Didn't we go through a layoff process, and don't we have a list of employees that we can bring back from that layoffs list?
Well, for example, the payroll technician, we only have one classification for that position. What I have in mind is hiring this person for that specific purpose. That was really precipitated this request. With regard to that, whether laid off employees can come back to a temporary position, that's not a question that I'm qualified to answer that.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Just to kind of go back to Supervisor Botello's comment that's really resonating with me is regards to cost and timelines. And one of the reasons why we want to have this kind of an open blank, just so that way the board understands the concept here, is that we need to bring people on quickly. It takes time to come back to the board, to write an AIT, to write a staff report. It can take a month in time. We are looking at bringing the financial management part of the system on board the new fiscal year, basically, less than five months from now. And we have a lot of work in front of us still. Joe Paul has been working an incredible amount of hours. He worked 20 hours, I think, the last weekend with the chart of accounts and general ledger. So there's a tremendous amount of work going on, and there's still a lot of work that needs to occur. If I may, January 22nd, 2013, the board did approve that, Supervisor De La Cruz. And in there, it explains the total cost of the project is not to exceed the allocated funds that was talked about during the budget hearings. The funds will cover the ERP software licensing, software, hardware, and staff and professional services. So your board did approve staffing for this particular project. Just want to make sure the board is aware of that.
But it doesn't mention that we were going to allow temporary employees a joint CalPERS, and that's my argument.
Well, and Supervisor Munzer and Supervisor De La Cruz, that's the reason why we're here today is to talk about that. And the board may go ahead and pass this or may not, and that's fine. It's up to the board what the board wants to do. It's just going to have to take a little bit more time for us to come back to you for those approvals.
Supervisor Rivas?
Yeah, the only thing I want to state for the record is I agree with staff, but at the same time, I have a difference of opinion. I believe that there is experience out there that's not necessarily tied to PERS, and that's why I'm not going to support this. So, thanks, Mr. Chair.
What's the pleasure of the board?
I'd like to make a motion at this time, Mr. Chair. Let me get down to the wording. I'll make a motion to approve the waiver of County Personnel Policies and Procedures Handbook Rule 1.H.3 prohibiting CalPERS benefits for temporary employees for ERP-related temporary employees by minute order.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed?
No.
No.
Passes 3-2. You have who is who? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joe Paul. We'll move on to item 13.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was one of the supervisors that pulled this, and no reflection on Steve, because I know he always tries to keep the costs for these kind of projects down. But after a while, it gets a little frustrating when you see these coming back, you know, time and time again, especially when the original contract pretty much stated what was to be. And I guess what my biggest concern is that this consultant contractor, whoever it is, and not just for item number 13, but item number 14, can come back over and over and over and say, well, we couldn't work out a deal, we couldn't negotiate, with us not really knowing, at least I don't, but hopefully you do, Steve, knowing why these things are so necessary to come back, and what is so compelling to have to increase the contract amount and the contract time. So, thank you. If you can offer
Sure.
me an explanation.
Sure.
I would
This
appreciate it.
particular consultant deals with right-of-way acquisition, and it's always a touchy process to try to purchase property from willing and non-willing sellers. That is kind of our situation with this particular item, is that we have a, as you may recall, I believe it was the first meeting on February 4th, where we approved a contract for outside legal services as well to help us acquire a particular property. This contract amendment goes hand in hand with that contract amendment for Brenda Aguilar, who was the attorney, outside counsel, who was hired to assist us with the procedure to go through and acquire that property from that person who's we're unable to reach an agreement with, or we're working to reach an agreement with. So this kind of contract is very difficult to try to scope in the very beginning in terms of how, when you're dealing with a number of properties. In this particular Hospital Road Bridge project, we're dealing with 8 property owners, including the state of California. It's difficult to know how each one of those is going to go through the negotiation process. As we go through that process, we're updated on a constant basis. We're having team meetings and so forth, identifying which properties are where in the acquisition process. Like I said, with this particular project, we have a particular property owner that it's been a little more challenging to deal with, so it's caused costs to escalate in that fashion. This consultant only works on time and materials basis. In other words, that they are only billing for the actual time that we're authorizing them to do work. They don't go ahead and tell us, you know what, I need 14 more hours to do this, or 5 hours to do this. It's actually the other way around, is okay, you need to create this agreement or this process. We're going to give you 2 hours for that, or 3 hours for that, and so forth. We anticipate that this will cover everything, but as we go into a potential situation, like I said, we can't guarantee that this will be the last one, even at this number. We certainly hope it will be, but for this particular contract in this particular realm, it's very difficult to go through the process. That's why we're on amendment number 4.
And Steve, do we have any control whatsoever to save taxpayer dollars? You know, at what point do we stop negotiating and follow a different plan? Or is there a different plan? I mean, are we just at the mercy of,
Well, basically, there's as has been explained to me, and I'll you know, please feel free to chime in, County Council, on this. But we are tied to a certain statute. One of the processes that is very important, and there's a lot of precedent that's out there in legal circles as to how property is acquired through a process, and we need to follow the process very closely to make sure we don't run afoul of the law. So there is one hand that says, hey, you know what, we're spending so much on consultants. If we would have applied that to the negotiation price, maybe we would have been able to reach a deal. That is not the way that public agencies are allowed to proceed in the acquisition of properties. If there's anything further that you can add to that, Matt, please.
So this is eminent domain. This is condemnation. The government taking private property. There is a process spelled out in the statutes as how that procedure is to go about. Ultimately, if a agreement cannot be negotiated between the county and the private landowner, the solution, the resolution, is a lawsuit. And that's the attorney contract that we approved last time. Brenda Aguilera Guerrero from the Myers-Navi firm is the land use attorney that we use to condemnation proceedings. So in this case, potentially you could have had 8 separate lawsuits because there were 8 private landowners. Now imagine the cost of 8 separate lawsuits, okay? Tremendous cost to the public of taxpayer dollars. In this case, in this particular project, it's been frustrating, but the good news is that with the assistance of Ms. Wood, we've been able to reach an agreement with 7 of the 8 property owners. It's the 8th property owner that's holding us up. It's the 8th property owner that's requiring us to now hire an attorney and go into court and sue. So the process has actually worked. It's somewhat cumbersome, but it's actually worked in that it's gotten us agreements with 7 of the 8 property owners. Why haven't we reached an agreement with the 8th one? I don't know. You can't force someone to voluntarily agree with you. That's where the next step is, to commence litigation against that person, and that's what we're about to do.
okay. So there is an end to this madness.
Yes.
So, and the other thing is these funds are federal funds. Is that correct, Steve?
Yes.
Yeah. And is somebody at that level paying attention to
We are in constant communication. Basically, Caltrans handles for the FHWA. They act as our agent, and we keep Caltrans monthly updates as to what our progress is and what our standing is.
Okay, so if there were an issue with them, we certainly would have heard it, because we're making these decisions. We want to make sure that there are other eyes on this, so that even though you're doing a great job, and I know, but we're short-staffed, I mean, are we doing the right thing for the taxpayers? So,
Right.
Okay.
Right. And all these decisions right now are what's called in the right-of-way phase. There's the construction phase. There's 3 phases to these bridge projects: design, right-of-way, and construction. We're completely within our right-of-way phase right now, and we're within our dollars for that project right now. So there's no worries in that aspect.
Thank you, Steve.
Supervisor Botello?
Yeah, I think we're letting this contractor off a little too easy myself. I believe that she knew walking into this how much work it should have been. It's not to exceed. We signed that contract twice, you know, B3, and I don't see a breakdown of her hours in here. And, you know, it just seems just so convenient to come back and get another 10 grand, And, you know, I'm not happy about that. If we got agreements with 7 of the 8, we're going to litigation for the 8th one. What do we need to extend this contract for?
Basically for support of the litigation aspect of it, because basically when Brenda Aguilera comes into the process, she's going to rely upon an expert who's been dealing with the process, who can lay exactly what's going on, the groundwork for the negotiations that have gone on to date. It's much more efficient that way than to have the attorney spend a lot of time going through the files themselves. If they can have a communication between the negotiator and the attorney, it's a much better team, a much better effort, and we actually spend, although it is money, and the consultant here does make a fairly good hourly rate, not even close to what the attorney makes for the other side of it. So it's basically, it's a marriage of those two to try to make sure that we actually save money in the long run to the public.
Yeah. Well, we signed that, if this wasn't the third time, it's a little different. The second time we went along with it. The third time, she already knew what was going on, and if it was in the private sector, I just have a hard time believing that this would even be asked. Sometimes you have to work for no money, and I just, that's my opinion. So, I've done that a number of times in my business. Oops, I get to work for free, and another $10,000. I rather just see her finish the job and see how many hours it takes. I don't know. I just don't. I can't support just writing another $10,000 check just for the heck of it, because maybe, without justification of the hours that have been spent already. And she ought to be putting in a little bit and take, maybe you don't make $200 an hour this time. Maybe you make $150 an hour and be happy with it. But that's the way I feel about this. 3 times is too many for me.
I guess my comment is I feel this is a health and safety issue, long overdue. This project should have been done a long time ago. To take 15 years to build a bridge where, emergency services are having to go a ways around to get to people's property and houses. We need to get this done. Also having help with staff on another project in the same region, I know how frustrating this can be sometimes. And property owners can drag out the process because they're trying to actually wait us out and hope we go away. This project needs to get done. When we approved the contract with the attorney, I told staff we need to get this done, and it needs to get done. And unfortunately, it's going to cost money, and we need to get it done. Let's see. I will open it up to the public. Do we have any speaker cards? Okay. Bring it back to the board. What's the wishes of the board?
Mr. Chair, I'm going to support it reluctantly, but knowing that by paying this $10,000, as Steve said, this will actually save us money because there will be direct communication to a higher paid attorney, that if they had to start from scratch to get all the information, it's going to cost us even more money. So with that being said, I will make a motion that we approve it per staff recommendation.
And I will second that motion. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed?
No.
And that is a 4-1 vote, is that correct? Okay, 4-1 vote. We'll move on to item 14, Supervisor Barrios.
I need to get to that page, Mr. Chair. And I think that basically is the same argument that I had with the other one, is that this one says the project has experienced delays due to unanticipated site conditions. I mean, the conditions of the site, to me, have not changed. Everything remains the same for the last 15 years. So I just need an explanation as to what those site conditions are.
Sure. This actually is a contract with the design engineer for the Hospital Road Bridge. The site conditions that changed in the past was the actual location of the fault that was trying to be determined underneath the gravelly substructure of the river base. As you can picture that area right now, we have a lot of flowing sands, as we heard from one of our earlier reports. There's a lot of flowing sands out there that make identification of the actual fault location very difficult. So what happened was, in the initial contract, They assumed they could rely upon the USGS maps and so forth that were existing out there to identify where the fault location was. The first amendment to the scope was to change to actually, when they went out there, we had to prove to basically FHW and Caltrans that we knew where the location of the fault was and design the bridge so that it can accommodate movement along that fault line. So that's what the change site conditions refers to, is actually they initially did the scope based upon where the maps showed the fault was. Through the exploration and actually design process, the fault wasn't where it was supposed to be, and actually additional work had to go in to try to identify exactly where the fault was, which actually still is a very difficult thing to do because of the running gravels that are in that river out there. So therefore what had to actually happen was they had to actually assume a wider band of fault area and design the bridge accordingly. So that was a site condition. This particular amendment is actually looking to the future here in terms of getting the plans and specifications up to current standards, because they have been, it's been delayed for a while, as Chairman noted. The plans and specs have been kind of on a shelf for a little bit. What we need to do is make sure that they comply with the current Caltrans standards and make sure that when we actually are ready to go out to bid for that, part of this scope amendment is to bring those specifications up to current standards so they're ready to go out to bid in that process. And the other part of this amendment is actually construction support. What will happen is as we enter into construction, we'll have a construction management firm on site to watch the day-to-day activities, but as questions and other issues arise from the contractors of building the bridge, they'll be able to get, we'll have the designer basically available for questions that we may have as the county or the contractor may have to expedite the construction process. So this is kind of a twofold process: one, to get the specifications ready to go, and then two, for that support and during the construction process. It's kind of hopeful. You'll note that the expiration of the contract is actually 15, end of the year in 15. That's when we actually hope the bridge will actually be installed. We anticipate it'll take 2 construction seasons. The hopeful process is we can get through that other issue with the last property owner and then be able to get under construction later on this summer and then complete the project in the following summer. That's the hope, and that's why this contract is here before you today.
And Steve, when we've delayed this, are these consultants, contractors, well, this is a contractor, are they doing work elsewhere? Because we delayed it, I mean, now we're paying another $100,000. I mean, that's like a full year of somebody's employment. Are we to say that while this is on hold and it hasn't moved forward, they're sitting there waiting for us? I mean, that's what it gives the impression that is happening, and I can't imagine that that's the case.
Yeah, if they were waiting on us, they would be out of business a long time ago.
I figured as much.
Basically, what ends up happening is this is a consultant who does a lot of work with Caltrans processes. Actually, one of the principals with Bengal Engineering was an actual former Caltrans designer for Caltrans themselves, and started his own firm. So he does do a lot of work for Caltrans type projects, Caltrans funded projects. So we are not their only client. So they do have a lot of other processes that go. As Supervisor Munzer pointed out, this bridge has been in process for 15 years or so. Many of our other bridges take 3, 4, 5 years to construct. Bridge building is a very long, slow process, but
Well, I guess my point is that the original contract said that they will provide subject management services, prepare plans, specifications, bid documents. Everything that you just mentioned is in their original plan.
Right.
And now they haven't done that, but now they're going to do it at a...
Actually, they have done that. They have done it. But now what we're going to do is make sure when they did that, the specifications that were approved by the state were in a different era. It's like building codes. They change every so often, the new building codes. So what happened is there are changes to the specifications that have happened, and we need to now go through the ones that they've already created to verify that those changes are applied. And then the other part that they are doing for us is they are marrying those specifications to the county's front-end documents for bidding purposes here in the county. Kind of in that aspect being an extension of staff, because we don't have the staff necessarily right now to marry those state-required specifications to our own county front-end documents. So they have done that work, and now they're just basically essentially redoing it, updating it to current standards.
Okay. All right, I guess that old saying, time is money, really holds true for here, for this thing, because it's been a long time. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Supervisor Botello?
Yeah, I agree with you, Supervisor Munzer. The project, it needs to be completed, and it's been a long time. But, you know, I don't want to give the impression that these consultants can just go out and raise the price on the services that they're rendering to us. And this is another example. You know, this is not just a little bit of money. It's 1/3 of the cost of the, and if looking at the contract, the scope of services in Section 2, services have been specified in the original contract and are not modified, and it kind of goes against the justification of the $91,000 that we're being asked to, amend here. It's just, frustrating to me that, and in the fact that I'm one of those guys that checks the bill when I have dinner out and make sure I'm not being overcharged. And we see the scope of services and we're just checking a few boxes. And I don't know what the payment schedule has been. Obviously, since the project hasn't got started yet, there should be a balance of the original monies still intact, because I think it pays for some of the construction oversight as well, doesn't it, Steve, with this particular consultant?
Normally, we don't. I don't know if it's an older contract. Normally, we don't do the construction support services until we're in construction phase. For just that reason, we don't know how long it's going to be. As I said, these contracts are broken. These projects are broken out into the PS&E, project specification estimate, right-of-way, and then construction. We don't know how long that right-of-way process is going to take. So typically, we don't now, like it's, this actually, the original contract predates me, but now we don't put a construction phase on the design contract until we have all those numbers and ready to go to construction phase. Since those dollars come from separate different pots from the FHWA, we don't want to incur those costs or have that. We're trying to do exactly what you're saying, is trying to keep them on a short leash for each individual phase. So now when it comes to do a different phase, the process would be to, okay, now they're given another leash for this phase to get this done. This particular contract, I have to look at a little more closely to see how it was done. But as we do it now, basically the design consultant is only allowed to do a certain phase of work until we get the next Caltrans or FHWA approval to go to the next phase of work. So I can check it real quickly if you'd like. But I don't believe that construction support to the effect that we are designing right now was included in the original contract.
Now, should we wait till we have acquired the area for the project before we agree to the amendment for this payment, just in case he doesn't come back for another amendment for another $90,000 down the road? Or, that's what, I feel sorry for you. It's nothing with, with the Director of Public Works. It's too bad these consultants don't come in here and take the heat instead. And because they're the ones that should be answering some of these questions, as far as I'm concerned, in the fact that, come in here and justify why you're asking for this much more money above the original contract. Mm-hmm. And because we don't see the billing or the payments or the hours that have already been put in place, and the justification for the additional funds. And that's why it's so frustrating for me. It's a third more.
Right.
But anyhow.
I'll open this up to the public.
This is from before. He would like to give that to you for your records. That's from me. Thank you. Marty Richmond from Hollister. I just want to make a comment. I know, we have taken to beating up the consultants, but I think that the rules on a lot of these things are made by the state, and we're stuck with them. The fact we can't get people to work for nothing, we're stuck with that. The fact we have to pay CalPERS, we're stuck with that. We're stuck with a lot of stuff. And if I was a consultant, I'd be happy to come and face you, and if you ask me why it costs more money, I have to say, because it's 15 years later than it was before. And the specifications change, and if some homeowner came in here and said, I want to build my house to the original plan 15 years before, you'd laugh them out the door. Because the fire marshal would be here say, no, all the rules have changed, you didn't go far enough, we didn't lock you in, we demand you do this, and we demand you do that. And the funny part is, so I'm not giving a blanket pass to consultants. Plenty of them, you know, they're ex-CalPERS, they know what's going on, they know when they take the contract, it's probably going to be 15 years, and they're probably going to have to up it again. But that's not their problem, that's our problem. I'm sure that the 15 years, I'm sure this consultant, whoever it is, I have no idea. They're not my uncle. I'm sure this consultant would have been more than happy to take the money 15 years ago and be finished with this project and be gone and not have to listen to themselves be berated all the time. We keep, you know, we spent on the guy on the general plan, we berated the hell out of him and then rehired him. So I hope we get that out of our system. I think we ought to look and be very particular, and if somebody's taking us to the cleaners, we ought to tell them they're taking us to the cleaners. But if it's our fault, and if it's the state's fault, or the federal government's fault, or the act of God fault, force majeure on the contract, it's in there, I'm sure, then we ought to just say, well, that's the way it is. Thank you for your time.
Mr. Chairman, for a point of clarification, this contract we entered into in August 10th of 2010.
Is there anybody else from the public that would like to comment on this item? Seeing none.
Actually, clarification once again, that was the last amendment to the contract. The actual initial contract was 2004.
Oh, okay.
Shoot.
Well, then it is still a long time. But, you know, it's still, you know, we reviewed it in 2010.
Correct. That was an amendment. That was amendment number 1 in 2010, correct.
And I signed that one.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would have fired him.
Again, what's the wishes of the board?
I pulled it, Mr. Chair. I'll make a motion, very reluctantly, but with the explanations, I understand, to approve this item per staff recommendation.
Okay, and I will second it. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed?
Oppose.
Once again,
Just for
passes
the sake of
4-1.
being consistent.
I think I will take a 10-minute break now before we go to the public hearing, and then we'll move into the public hearing. I think we're losing members here.
I'm with you. You know what I want to talk to you about?
I just feel like
without ever coming back to a further vote of the electors of CSA 55. So it's going to be tied to cost of living increases. Also, we changed the resolution. Today I passed out a red line copy. The main change to the resolution is to eliminate any reference to special benefit. The special benefit is a holdover from when we were contemplating an assessment for this district. There were some problems with, for the CSA, there were some problems with doing an assessment, so we switched it to a special tax. In one hand, you could say that the reference to a special benefit is just surplus language, but just so that there's no questions and it doesn't raise any issues in the future, and just to be cautious, we eliminated any reference to a special benefit. Also, we corrected a couple minor typos to the resolution. The most notable one was when we indicated the appropriations limit, we stated as $73,000, and we left off the $940, so that was added. The landowner returned the signed ballot to the elections department on Friday. They've consented to the special tax and to the establishment of the initial appropriations limit. So the board is requested today to hold the public hearing, and after the public hearing, then it will be requested just to make the finding that nobody's, there's been no change in the ballots that have been submitted, which are not expected. And then to make the CEQA findings, adopt the resolutions and the agreement to annex. Brian Curtis, the owner's representative for Anderson Homes, is present today in case there's any questions. I'm present, and if you have any questions, please let me know.
Any questions of the board? Barbara, I have one. It's on page 237 of our agenda. It's under where you list this covenant and agreement, and then you have several recitals. And my question is G, and it says, whereas as a condition of receiving LAPCO approval for the formation of the county service area, owner is willing to consent to annex to the property of the city and to waive their rights to protest the annexation of the property to the city when such becomes legally permissible. What does that mean?
It's going to take some step of the city, or at some point in the future when there's any desire to annex this land. This is a covenant that runs with the property, so the future landowners will be bound by it when they buy the property. It's basically saying that they're not going to protest annexing to the city when that time comes, if it ever comes to pass that the city desires to annex this property, that they're basically, the current landowner is giving up the right to protest that annexation in the future.
So are they going to be already, are these?
They're not going to be annexed now. I have no idea when they'll actually be annexed, but if the city, I believe it says when the city determines that it's appropriate to annex this land, and if there's some sort of annexation proceedings that are actually started, presumably by the city, would have to take the step to actually annex this land, then the owners aren't going to protest it.
Okay, but would they be using the city sewer system? Would they be hooking up to the sewer system? So that if the city comes in and says that they have to annex now, then they'll have a large sewer hookup fee that they
essentially, there's a presentation later in the board agenda talking about some of these service areas and so forth. This particular subdivision will be served by Sunny Slope County Water District and City of Hollister Sewer as it currently sits. For all intents and purposes, it will look exactly like a city subdivision. However, it is an extension of Cypress Street and it is within the county.
Okay, all right, thank you.
It's right on the border of where the city and the county meet right now.
Yes, I
There's
understand
another
that.
subdivision that's going to be Creekside 6. It's just going to be coming down the similar path to the Board of Supervisors in the near future, and that's going to be look exactly like this Creekside 5 as well.
Okay, because my concern was if they were not, as they're built, if they were not hooked up to the city sewer, then all of a sudden the city came in and said, okay, you have to hook up, and then they were presented with a large, fee to hook up to the sewer system, then you would get, I know we would get protests, whether they sign this now or not, we would get protests.
Correct. The infrastructure to hook up is already in place.
Okay, thank you. All right. I will open it up, the public hearing. Do we have any speaker cards? Would anybody like to address the board on this item? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. What is the pleasure of the board?
Joe Paul Gonzalez from the Elections Department, County Auditor, Clerk Recorder, and County Clerk, has already tabulated the ballots that were submitted to his office, and we find that the ballot measure has passed. 100% of the ballots that were cast were in favor of the two measures, so that process has already been completed.
Okay.
And the board can go ahead and now adopt the resolutions.
Thank you, Barbara.
What's the number?
Start.
15 and 16? Okay, I'll make a motion to approve resolutions 2014, 15, and 16 with the amended changes.
And also to make the CEQA findings set forth on attachment A to the AIT, and also approve the owner's covenant and agreement to annex.
As stated as the Ms. Thompson.
I'll second it under the question. Can we also have to include in the motion results in the election?
Joe Paul Gonzalez has signed Exhibit A, indicating that 100% of the ballots that were cast were in favor.
That's good enough, not to include in the motion.
Yes, it's actually included in the resolution already, and it was just signed. Yes.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Passes 5-0.
Thank you.
Thanks, Barbara.
Thank you. One thing done.
Okay, we will move on to regular agenda. County Administrator Office, ready for some other?
Management analyst here to discuss this with your board, and there's a few technical difficulties. I'm going to have to take a look at that, too.
What happened? No.
I got one.
You good?
No, I don't. I'll plug mine in.
Okay, good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the board. The purpose of today's report is to introduce a discussion and provide recommendation to staff on the establishment of a tourism business improvement district. With the elimination of redevelopment agency funding and the decline of general fund revenue for discretionary use in California, there has been an increase in the establishment of tourism business improvement districts. One of the best-kept secrets about San Benito County is its 262 days of sunshine. All who live in and visit this gorgeous county enjoy numerous local, state, and federal parks, golf courses, we have a wine trail, and then there's several annual special events. Overnight guests to San Benito County may select from 15 different lodging establishments. There's 2 hunting ranches, 5 RV parks and campgrounds, and there's 8 hotels throughout the county. One of the ways to provide funding for the promotion of tourism in San Benito County is to establish a Tourism Business Improvement District, or TBID. Authorized by the Property and Business Improvement District Law of 1994, this law authorizes cities and counties to establish TBIDs, And if a countywide district is established, a resolution approving the district by respective city councils is required. T-bids are created by the hotelers or the lodging establishments who control and manage the district through an owners association. The district is funded by assessments that are levied on hotel stays. So these assessments may be a fixed dollar amount or per night, or they could be a percent of the room and space revenue. The revenue raised by T-bids can be used for a wide variety of activities, including but are not limited to promotion of special events, music in public places, promotion of tourism, or security, sanitation. But the ultimate goal of a T-bid is to increase lodging occupancy rates. Let's talk a little bit about T-bids throughout California. As I previously noted, the number of T-bids in California has increased. There's currently 82 of them in California, and they generate $162 million in revenue. The smallest district in California has 2 lodging establishments, and it raises an annual budget of $44,000. The largest district has 174 lodging establishments, and it raises $130 million. I'm sorry, $30 million. That's in San Diego. The smallest district is in Tiburon, just for your information. So what are the benefits of a T-bid? Well, first of all, they're created, designed, and operated by the owners of the lodging establishments. Unlike the TOT revenue, the revenue that's collected or generated can't be diverted to other government purposes. A management district plan is developed and managed by that owners association. The T-bid provides then a stable funding source for those agencies to promote tourism. The initial term of a T-bid is 5 years, and it can be renewed in 10-year increments. So what is a management district plan? Well, it establishes the boundary of the district, determines if there's any benefit areas, and the rates to be assessed. The types of services that we talked about before include but are not limited to promotion of music out in public places, promotion of tourism, marketing and economic development, security, sanitation, graffiti removal, and any other services that benefit directly those lodging establishments. What is the implementation process? Well, the first step is this proposal on the, to discuss the proposal to establish a T-bid with the governing bodies. So it's going to you today, it's going to the City of San Juan Bautista this evening, and then it will be presented to Hollister City Council on March 3rd. Before you today is also a recommendation to issue the RFP for T-bid services, and that agency will help us with the development of the relationship or the management district plan with the hotel organizations. Staff will begin working with those lodging establishments to determine their interest to establish a T-bid. In fact, we have a meeting set with them tomorrow. If I get approval to proceed with the RFP today, the intent is to award that contract to the agency in April. And the first step in the process at that point is to get a petition that would be signed by at least 50% of those hotel or lodging establishments. And then the process begins. And there will be the resolutions adopted by the joint cities, and there's a protest hearing process, and then by resolution, or I'm sorry, by ordinance, the T-bid would be adopted. So in conclusion, a tourism business improvement district will provide revenue to promote San Benito County and the available lodging options to visitors that are enjoying our abundant recreation opportunities and special events and the 262 days of sunshine. So it's recommended today that your board authorize staff to proceed with the process and establish a tourism business improvement district and release the RFP for the T-bid services.
Supervisor Rivas?
Yeah, I appreciate the report, but I do have some concerns, and I feel like maybe we're putting the cart before the horse here. And the reason I say that is because it seems like a lot of staff time has been invested. You know, we're about to launch this RFP process, but this whole process, if I'm, you know, I may be right or wrong here, is driven by our hotel owners. And it wasn't too long ago that we went through, was it a P-bid process with the city? It was sponsored by the hotel, by the Downtown Association.
Sure.
They did all this work, and then the owner said, we don't want this, so it went away. My concern is, you know, I wanted to learn more about the T-bids in the state, so I downloaded some studies and some reports, and the one thing I found that was a concern to me was, you know, the primary organizer of T-bids said here that the primary organizers come from the lodging industry at 47%. The next was local, the DMOs, which is a destination marketing, a marketing organization, and the lowest percentage of the P-bids came from local governments at 11%. So my concern is, we've invested all this staff time. You know, what is the relationship we've established with these hotel owners and really the people that are going to be driving this effort? You know, I know that you said we have a meeting with them tomorrow, but I mean, shouldn't this whole process be driven by them and the fact that they are interested and they want to do this? So that's my first question. My other concern is, you know, I think it sounds great. You know, anything we can do to promote our county is certainly a positive thing, especially at a time where we're not really investing anything towards our economic development here in San Bernardino County since the exit of Miss Martin. But at the same time, you know, I really hope that if this is the road we go down, that all of us here on this board are going to do what we can to help this effort. And the reason I say that is because, you know, it wasn't that long ago that we chose to withdraw our support for state legislation that we helped sponsor to rename a local highway to help promote and bolster local tourism. And so it's ironic that we're here in this effort to try to, you know, make that happen now. And I just hope that there is some follow-through if this is the road we choose to go down. So that was my number one concern, was the lead organization, the concern that we seem to be the lead organization in this. I'm sure I have something else, Chair, so I'm good.
Supervisor De La Cruz.
No, thank you. Actually, over the weekend, I spent some quality time talking to two owners of hotels, and they share their concerns with me to express in their behalf to the board how they feel. They feel that they are small players in this game. They like the idea. They support the concept. However, will money be channeled to these poor small hotels? And I'll give you one for example. Cinderella Hotel. Will they be able to generate benefit out of the creation of this district, and will their voice be heard? So there's already, you know, within the group already some you know, discussions how to go about it, and we need to make sure that they buy into it. You know, it is nice for us to lead it at first, but ultimately it has to be bought in by these members of this business in order to become very successful. And it has to be a fair distribution of how the funds will be distributed.
Supervisor Patello?
Yeah, I just want to first commend Janelle on an outstanding amount of work that she's put to this, and I'm certainly going to miss these type of reports when you're not be here with us. I don't know what we're due to have this going into the future, and how this all kind of came about. I was on a trip to Sacramento, and like I said earlier, I was examining my bill coming home, and I saw that there was two types of taxes on it. And one was a tax for the TOT tax, and the other one was this TID
You called it a tourism tax.
Right.
It was probably on your bill.
That's right. And so, you know, from an earlier meeting of the month, we were discussing, you know, should we allocate some of our sales taxes or TOT taxes if the board and the cities raise our TOT tax to promotion of, you know, maybe the San Bernardino County economic development and so forth. And we had quite a discussion about that, and I don't think we've came to a conclusion on how to do that or what we're, you know, going to do with that TOT money and designate that out. And so when I saw this special tax on my bill, I thought, well, why don't we address it this way? And it would be a public-private type of partnership. The industry needs to promote itself as well, and I would like to see even it expanded off of the you know, the hotels, but maybe include perhaps the wine industry as well. You know, they have a lot to gain by increasing tourism in our county, and their growth could be, you know, we have to invest in it. We're a small county with limited resources and income. Sales tax is limited. The property taxes rates are the lowest in the state, what we get. And we try to be a yes and try to provide all these different services and partnerships. And it's next to impossible, if it is impossible. But I do agree on at this point in time, maybe we're rolling this out a little bit too fast. I would like to probably have a presentation to like the Chamber of Commerce, the business organizations, other stakeholders, business stakeholders, before we go and spend too much of our own efforts moving this forward. And I think what Supervisor Rivas stated does make some sense, and then we could learn a little bit more about that. That's why you should stay on board a little bit longer, Janelle, and see this thing all the way through. Yeah, because we do have to find a way to, you know, promote the county assets, and because this is a special place, we have a lot of opportunities as far as people visiting and enjoying the area. In fact, I had one of your champions on the Parks and Rec call me and ask, you know, how can we fund one of those brochures to put throughout the region? And I'm not sure we have the revenue to do that. And that's probably something that the chamber should be doing. But if we could help be a partner in that and facilitate maybe a revenue stream that's fair and equitable for everybody, maybe we start working better together. But we have to have that dialogue with more of the stakeholders rather than do the RFP right now. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr.
Supervisor
Chairman.
Barrios?
Thank you so much. This was discussed at the Intergovernmental Committee that Supervisor De La Cruz sit in, and he wasn't there. He came in at the very tail end. But the City of San Juan Bautista, the City of Hollister, San Benito County, and County Office of Ed were represented there, and it was well received. They thought that it was a very good idea. Now, if we go through, Janelle, with this RFP approval, and then you go in tomorrow and meet with the owners, and they say, you know what, we're not interested, then it dies.
It does.
Then that RFP. But if you have an RFP so they can see what exactly they are going to be receiving for this, you know, what kind of service, then you have something concrete that the questions will be answered. You'll have information for them that this board and possibly the City of San Juan and the City Council.
That's correct.
Will move forward. So we need this in order to present to them and help them make a decision. Am I right?
And those agencies that they would be providing those services for us have experience in the establishment of T-bids throughout California. In fact, one agency has done like 60 of them, of the 82. So they would be able to explain adequately to those interested hotel operators that to explain the benefit that they would derive. And there's a whole assessment process with determining the benefit derived from the assessments that that the guests will contribute toward. So they have the experience in working with those hotel agencies to listen to what type of services they would like, and then to develop an assessment plan and a budget that meets their needs and what their goals are for this community. So that was the advantage of having the agency on board with this, is their experience at developing those engineers' reports, if you will, to clearly identify the services that the hotel agencies want and what those costs are, and then the benefits derived directly attributed to each of those hotel operations.
Okay, and if I still have the floor, Mr. Chair. So, Janelle, now, we award the contract on April the 1st, and then in June, the petition is signed by the 50 plus 1% of the owners. They decide not to sign it. They decide that this is not where they want to go. We need them on board to be able to move forward.
That's right. We don't proceed without that.
Okay, but we already have a contract that has been awarded.
Because that agency will be working with us and the hotel agencies to develop a management plan. They would receive the petition at the point that there's a management plan that they can go through and determine that this is the route they want to go. Without the management plan, there's nothing for them to approve by petition. So we really need the management district plan first so that the hotel operators can say, yes, this is what we want to go for. They're, in a sense, saying, we're petitioning the county now. Here's our management plan. We would like to proceed with the establishment of a T-bid.
Okay, so
And
you do
they
have
will
to have the management plan in order to proceed. Otherwise, what is there to present to them?
They won't have anything that they
will
want
have
to
nothing
approve.
concrete.
That's correct.
So it's not premature. We're not putting the cart before the horse at this point, as Supervisor.
And if I can add one more thing on that, the intent of the meeting tomorrow, Supervisor Reservis, to his question about the cart before the horse, and the fact that the county is proceeding with it, what we're trying to do is see if there's an interest. We will establish tomorrow, hopefully, a steering committee of peers of the hotel agencies. That steering committee is going to be the group that's going to carry this forward. We're there to assist them and to be a partner in the process, but really it's a steering committee of the hotel agencies that will be guiding this process. So we're just trying to see, is there an interest?
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Supervisor De La Cruz.
Thank you. Janelle, so if tomorrow's meeting, there's no interest, it just dies, right?
Potentially that would occur.
Okay. So by doing,
I think tomorrow you may find that there won't be all of the hotel establishments present. So I wouldn't recommend that it conclude at that point. I think we need to continue with the effort to try and explain, get a steering committee on board of hotel operators who are going to help carry this process through, to look at, well, what kind of services would we like to provide? What do we want this money for? Do we want to promote each individual hotel? Do we want to help the chamber promote, the destination marketing firm, promote San Benito County as a place to come visit? The hotel agencies are the ones that are going to determine that management plan. I think we need to march forward and assist them in the development of the plan that would serve their needs.
because right now, what Mr. Chair, what do we have in place right now? When somebody comes into San Benito County and pays their hotel stay, they're paying the TOT, right? That's it, nothing else.
That I'm aware of.
Right now, there's just that, nothing else.
That's
They're not paying for that, the TBID, right?
No, there's no set district in this county yet.
Okay. Okay. Because it will be interesting to know that would small mom and pops hotels, services, logging services, they're just breaking even. Will they be absorbing that TBID money in order to continue to have those visitors come in?
What will happen is their bill will include as an assessment, and they will determine the rate that they would choose to assess, and it could be based on a benefit area. For instance, the City of Hollister, maybe those hotels in the City of Hollister proper would pay a different assessment rate than, say, somebody out in an unincorporated portion of the county, or the RV parks may pay a different rate. The rates are generally a 1% to 2% on top of the hotel charge, or a flat rate. I've seen on some of the T-bids as low as 50 cents per room reservation that's added onto their bill. So that group will determine the assessment amount as to what they would like, they would feel comfortable with, and how much revenue it would raise, and would they have enough resources to do some promotion. What I've seen developed is a website that somebody's coming out here to San Benito County to go to the motorcycle rally, for instance. Well, where do I stay? They can log into the San Benito County Tourism District website, and all the lodging establishments would be listed there. So it's a way to provide marketing dollars that these small hotels just possibly don't have the revenue to do.
Supervisor Rivas?
Right, and I do want to clarify my point because it simply was my opinion. We're putting the cart before the horse because my opinion is the fact that we've invested a lot of staff time in preparing this in RFP, and staff time is money. And there's no guarantee that this is going to succeed. You know, if it were up to me, the first thing I would have done is reach out to stakeholders in this whole process. You know, but that's just my opinion. You know, I'm not saying I'm right or I'm wrong. And the reason I say that is because in the study that I pulled and I'm referencing, it says the most challenging steps in the TBID formation process is owner outreach and education. And we haven't even done that prior to all of this work that's already been done. So if they're not even interested, all this work that's been done is money that we're throwing down the toilet. That's why I want to take a cautious approach, and we've got to gauge their interest. And then if it's strong, absolutely we need to move forward. But it's just, in my opinion, I'm questioning the process, and I'm concerned about that process to this point. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I'd like to concur with Supervisor Rivas. Other than I had to correct him on one thing. I believe the PBID that the Downtown Association is not gone. It's still out there, but it's kind of in limbo right now. Janelle, you say there's the 2 ranches, the 5 RV parks, and the 8 hotels. The 8 hotels are all the hotels in both incorporated and unincorporated areas?
Yes, that's
okay.
correct.
So they'll all be in one district, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Then, and I guess it's unlike the PBID for the Downtown Association where the members are taxing themselves. This tax will be
Hotel guests.
It'll be transferred to the people that stay at the hotel or the RV park.
That's correct.
So it'd be, okay, so they're not actually taxing themselves.
No.
Okay. My concern, again, I see no hotel operator in our room today. Maybe there might be one potential future hotel operator here, but I see no hotel operator, and that's not a good sign to me. I know even with the Hollister Downtown Association being the lead agency, they have struggled with getting the PBID passed in this community. And the other thing I'm afraid of is we are committed, I believe we are committed to raising the TOT tax. I believe that the industry could see this as double taxation, and it could just muddy the waters for our attempt to raise the TOT tax. So I am very concerned about this. I think I would like to see you have your meeting tomorrow and then come back to us, and depending on how the meeting goes tomorrow or sequential meetings, then come back and ask us to do the RFP.
It's an option.
If there's no questions before any other questions with us right now? Okay.
I do, Mr.
Okay,
Chair.
all right.
I was going to look this up and I didn't. Janelle, we have an adopted budget 1314 that includes $75,000 in budget 1001-180. What is that specific to?
That we budgeted that last year because we were going to move forward potentially with the general tax effort. So that's what those dollars were designated for, which we didn't proceed with.
Okay, so then we do have some monies that
Available for the RFP.
available for this. Now, would you see a problem, because I think the supervisors have really valid concerns. Is there a problem with waiting, knowing the RFP has not been approved, but you have a copy of it, that you could present to the owners, stakeholders, and they could see how we may be proceeding forward?
Sure.
Do you think that that's an issue in getting them to understand and to jump on board? Because I think this is a great way to promote San Benito County. It's an inexpensive way to promote us, but are we doing it, are we channeling it
What it does, it just, it delays the opportunity to have the consultant on board with us to work with the hotel agencies. It would provide staff with that opportunity to do the legwork that Supervisor Rivas is recommending, that there be more contact and work with the hotel agencies. So in that interim period, we can continue to work with them and hopefully tomorrow establish that steering committee and really begin discussing the benefits of a T-bid.
And with us not moving forward, let's say today, I know this is going to be presented to San Juan Bautista City Council, but they're not approving an RFP.
No, it's for information.
They're just going to hear the concept.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes. And then it'll go to Hollister on the 3rd of March, which would be the day, potentially would be the next opportunity to come back to you and ask that you release the RFP.
Okay. Well, what I don't want to do is I don't want to give the impression that we're not interested at all, that we think it's a bad idea, because personally I think it's a great idea. So that would be my only concern, that message gets carried to the councils.
Okay.
That we are supportive of this. We just wanted to make sure that the stakeholders were contacted first. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so you bring up an interesting point. Are we bearing the full brunt of the RFP? We're budgeting, the city of Hollister and the city of San Juan is not.
At this time, that's not part of the discussion.
Well,
But
they should contribute. They get a benefit.
Okay. Supervisor Botello?
Yeah, I think the board is kind of looking to see a little bit more feedback before we commit to the RFP, and that's fine. But I don't know how much criticism other board members have had. I've had more. My fair share of it is, how are you promoting the Pinnacles National Park? How are you promoting economic development in this county? And quite frankly, we don't. And this is an avenue of showing, I think, some leadership. It's certainly be driven by the stakeholders and the hotel folks. It's not a double taxation in the sense that it's a specific revenue for a specific cause. It can't be used for anything else. The TOT tax, as we've talked about, can be used for anything by any given board on any given year. And, I certainly think we should raise it to, the levels that other counties and cities have. I think ours is too low. And I think that's happen. But this revenue, it could go specifically for promotion of our assets in this county and improvement of the businesses that will benefit, and they have to be supportive of it. And I think my bill from Sacramento at the Holiday Inn was $2.50 out of a bill that was $100, and I didn't even notice it unless I was just kind of really looking for something. But I agree, maybe have that meeting tomorrow night, and if there's strong opposition, then I don't want to come back here in June and say, well, what are you doing for economic development? Maybe we shouldn't be doing anything in that case, but I really believe that the public wants us to do something like this, wants to promote our county and improve, the business climate. We just need to get out there and present the idea a little bit further. I still think it's a good idea myself, but I would like to have a little bit more feedback from probably the people that need to be the partners in it.
yeah, hopefully we'll establish a steering committee and we'll have a working group.
That would be way to go.
Let me open this up to the public. Anybody from the public like to address this?
Scott Fuller from San Juan Oaks, thank you. So I'm not here to say anything one way or the other about it. As someone who just has a hotel on paper, I would not presume to speak for those who are trying to make a living actually running a hotel. But I do want to say that as a member of the Chamber of Commerce Board and the head of the Tourism Committee several years ago, the Chamber of Commerce looked into both raising the TOT tax and doing a TBID. We talked to some hotel operators at that time, not all of them, but some. And so just a little bit of feedback based on that. Number one, we were volunteers. We were not professional. And I understand all the conversation about cart before the horse, but a sales job is required to make this happen. The first first blush, the first impulse, I think, of an operator is to say, more cost. I'm going to lay more cost onto my customers. That can't be a good thing. So a sales job is required. We as volunteers didn't do a good sales job. We didn't have the expertise to do a good sales job. I think Janelle has much more information and is a professional and potentially can do a good sales job. But the other thing to think about the RFP process is those people have a huge amount of experience, and I assume part of what they do is show the hotel operators the benefit of the program, which they might not otherwise come to mind. Secondly, I think you're going to hear, as we did, well, why isn't the current TOT going to tourism? Why is it going into the general fund? You want to raise the TOT. Our idea was to raise the TOT and use that increment towards tourism without touching the current TOT. But we got some pushback from that, from some operators saying all the TOT should be going to tourism efforts, and sort of resisting based on the fact that it was not. So that's just some feedback that we got. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott.
Marty Richmond from Hollister. Let me say something that Mr. Fuller did not say, that I think in addition to talking to people who already have hotels and would be able to vote, I think it would be important to talk to people who potentially have hotels, whether they're on paper or they're applying for permission or a distribution of chits to build a hotel. We know some of those are in the works. I understand they don't get a vote because they don't have a hotel, but I think it's important to get their view on the issue, because at some point in time, when they do have a hotel, then the majority might change depending on their view on the issue. So, plus they could help you sell it if they promote it, and they could make you understand better why they oppose it if they oppose it. So you get more views. So not just the people who have hotels, I think you should look to the future. In addition to that, Mr. Fuller just took my, beat my drum for me. What you perhaps ought to consider doing is lowering the TOT slightly and offsetting that with a TBIP of the exact same amount, so that that portion of the TOT essentially becomes reserved for promotion. You can't, I assume technically, I don't know the law, but I assume technically the TOT is essentially a general fund money, and you can't say, well, you know, I promise I'll use it for that because it was passed as general fund money. What you could do is say, we want to lower the TOT, whatever percent we want to raise the TBIP, eventually. Not talking about now, I'm talking about if you decide to do it. It's one of the possibilities you can use to sell it, depending on how much price elasticity there is in our room rates. And I have no idea what that is, because I don't know, based on how many hotels we have and how much competition and how far people are willing to drive to save $2. The owners know, the operators know how much price elasticity there is in their rates. So I suggest that you put that in your hip pocket and think about that and say that's at least a possibility if we can't find another way to do it. So if you drop the TOT the equivalent of 50 cents and put in a TBIB the equivalent of 50 cents, that money is reserved then for promotion. So I don't have a position on the whole thing yet till we see how it goes, but thank you for your time.
Actually, Janelle, Marty brings up a good point. Would this thing be structured in such a way that any new hotel would automatically be a member of the T-bid, or?
I'm not clear on how a new hotel becomes involved. It would be subject to the assessments. And I'm assuming when we go back to reallocate or renew the T-bid, they would be a voting member. But if one exists in this county, I'm assuming it would apply to all lodging establishments. If it, if it was approved by 50% of them.
Right. So if
it would be
was set up,
effective to all.
so, but a new hotel would automatically be,
Subject to it,
Subject
just like
to
a
it.
new hotel would be subject to the TOT.
yeah, okay, all right. Okay. Anybody else from the public would like to address this item? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the board. Supervisor Patella?
Yeah, I have a feeling that we're probably continue this item to a future date and get a report back as far as how the hotel people receive it. But are we ask staff to continue with the presentation to the two cities as well? Because it's absolutely essential that, if we pursue this, that the two cities are on board, because that's where the hotels are, and it's to their benefit, naturally, that this promotion possibility happens, that they support it as well. Yeah, we're showing the leadership on the issue, but it is a partnership with all involved.
Mr. Chair, if I could?
Yes.
Thank you. Because tomorrow's meeting, we really wouldn't have a person, a real salesperson, so to speak, as Mr. Fuller mentioned. I think it would be okay to have a date specific to continue this to March the 4th. I believe we have a meeting on March the 4th. And by that time, we will have information from San Juan Bautista, the City Council, Hollister City Council, and the property owner. So would you be prepared to give us that?
Sure, that would work.
Yeah, so I'll make that recommendation,
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
So I just want to make it clear. So you are providing direction to staff to continue to meet with the City of Hollister, City of San Juan, and with the stakeholders, and then report back to us on March 4th.
Yeah, and then keep all the other dates in place
Okay.
after we see what happens on March 4th.
Actually, Mr. Chair, Supervisor Barrios, the Intergovernment Committee will meet on the 6th of March. You don't want to at least vent it out right there and then go to the board?
I think because we have already met at the intergovernmental level, and there was approval there and
Okay.
good reception, I think we need to just move forward.
I wasn't there, so. So-
No, it was very
so
well
I don't know
received.
if I don't know if I can share the same thoughts at the board meeting.
It was well received, and I think
Okay.
that's why we're
Okay.
continuing the
Okay, so
process.
I have a
2, 3 is
motion.
all
Do
we
I-
need, okay.
Do I have a second to continue this discussion?
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Passes 5-0. We will move on to item 20. Mr. Espinoza, receiving the...
Thank you, Mr.
Board of
Chair.
Health.
Yes, this item we have on our agenda is an item that was brought to us is actually at a state level. Governor Brown declared our state a state of emergency with a drought, and we have Margie Riopel. She is covering OES manager in the sheriff's office, and she's been working with the state with regards to the drought, and she has a report to your board this morning. Thank you, Margie.
Thank you. Good morning. As CAO Espinoza stated, on January 17th, Governor Brown proclaimed state of emergency due to statewide drought conditions. There are 38 counties that were designated as a moderate to extreme drought counties by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and the county of San Benito is among those counties named and referenced in the proclamation that the governor signed. Governor Brown directed state officials to take all necessary actions to prepare for these drought conditions and to conserve water. The proclamation gives state water officials more flexibility to manage supplies throughout California under drought conditions. The governor's state of emergency proclamation follows a series of steps the governor has taken to ensure that California is prepared. In May of 2013, he issued an executive order to direct state water officials to expedite the review and processing of voluntary transfers of water and water rights. Then on December 17, 2013, he formed a state drought task force to advise him on the conditions and consider the long-term consequences of the drought. The leaders of the task force are the Secretary of California Department of Food and Agriculture, the Director of Water Resources, and the Chairman of the Water Resources Control Board. The task force is made of various state agencies and key stakeholder groups that meet weekly with a primary role to advise on critical issues needed to ensure needed and long-term impacts. The state proclamation issued by the governor calls for a voluntary 20% reduction of water use and urges the public to take conservation measures. The proclamation includes over 20 directives to manage and conserve water. Local urban water suppliers and municipalities are called upon to implement their local shortage contingency plans and update urban and agricultural water management plans. San Benito County Water District, I believe, is hearing an item this evening in regards to a resolution declaring a water shortage and implementation of a water shortage, and I'm sure he may expand upon that tonight because he can make a comment after this report. The City of San Juan Bautista has also passed a resolution in early January in regards to the management of their municipal water source. They declared a water shortage and implementation of conservation measures. County Public Works, who manages water resources for Dunville and Stonegate CSAs, is monitoring the status of water levels and consideration of conservation measures. Tres Pinos Water District also finds itself in a similar state and task as well. County OES has been working with state OES to collect and disseminate information in regards to our water issues here in San Benito County. So I've been working with some of the agencies I mentioned previously. On Friday, February 14th, President Obama traveled to Fresno and met with Governor Brown and other state representatives to participate in a roundtable discussion with farmers and other local stakeholders, and also to witness firsthand some of the impacts on the region's agriculture. A press release was issued by the White House to provide that provides funding and resources, and that copy of that press release was provided to you this morning and is at the back table for those who would like to see it. In regards to our water status in San Benito County, I'm going to refer you to Jeff Catano, the Director of San Benito County Water District, and he is here to provide you with an update. Jeff?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. So as Margie said, the situation in the state is pretty dire. If you look at just our local water supplies that we have here locally that we've managed, in the last 3 years, the rainfall in San Benito County total in 3 years has only been, to this date, only 15 inches. Average for us is, in 1 year, is about 13 inches right here in the Hollister area. So you can see in 3 years, we've gotten, only about 1 year's worth of water. If this year, from October 1st to now, which is our current hydrologic year, we've only gotten 1.6 inches of rain here in Hollister. Normally, we would have gotten around 6 or 7 inches by now. So you can see, how dry it's been. Last year, in November and December, were fairly wet. We got about 6 inches of rain in November and December, and then from January forward, it was just incredibly dry. That's created an issue for us here locally. Normally, we release about 12,000 acre-feet of water a year from Hernandez Reservoir on average, and about 17 to 1,800 from Piscinas Reservoir to recharge the basin and keep the water levels up through recharge in the San Benito River. This last year, we were only able to release about 4,000 acre-feet, and the last 2 years from Hernandez, the average has only been 6,000. Currently, Hernandez is absolutely empty, and so is Piscinas. So there will be no water to release this year into the creeks and streams to be able to recharge. So it's really a bad situation for us here locally. Fortunately, though, in the years leading up to this, we were able to manage the basin such that the groundwater levels and the basin was relatively full. But over the last year, the last 2 years with this drought and then this current year, up to October, we did see that there was about a 20-foot decline in the central portion of San Juan Basin. So around Lucy Brown, Bixby, there was about a 20-foot decline in groundwater levels there. Historically, at the lowest levels, that was about 90 feet lower than it is today. So we've got about another 90 feet before we get down to where they were in about 1977. But if you can see, if you do this for another 3 or 4 years, you're going to get down to where you were in about 1977. There were a couple of other areas that experienced about a 20-foot decline this last year because of the dryness and the increase in pumping that's it's associated with that, and that was primarily around the city of Hollister here on the west side of the Calaveras Fault. East side of the fault is a little bit different. Water tends to build up on the east side of the fault and then move over into the west side of the fault. So groundwater levels on the west side of the fault haven't experienced that same decline yet. On the CVP side, it's which is historically, which is the water that helped restore the basin to the levels that we saw to fill it back up again. On the CVP side, this current year, we're going to get a zero allocation for the agricultural portion of it. Last year, we only got 20% of our contract. So this last 2 years have been pretty low allocations for us. It takes about 20,000 acre-feet of imported water a year to be able to balance the basin, to keep it at to where it's in the amount of water that's removed and put back in are in balance. This current year, with the zero allocation that we're going to be seeing on the ag side, we'll be getting about a 50% allocation on the historic use for the M&I portion of our contract. But that M&I portion is much smaller than the ag portion, so there's only about 5,500 acre-feet of historic use. So we'll get about 50% of that, or about 2,750 acre-feet. That's all the water that we're going to get this year from the Central Valley project. On the plus side of it, 2 years ago, when the Water District got a very large allocation in 2011 when it was raining a lot, and we got an 80% allocation on our agricultural supply, we were able to store water outside of the district. And late last year in the summer, when we saw that this thing was building and what was coming, we started calling that water back. So we've actually got about 7,000 acre-feet of water. Even though we're going to have a zero allocation from the federal government, the district still has about 7,000 acre-feet of water that it's going to be able to allocate to its ag customers this year to be able to deliver water to them.
Okay, Jeff, if I can interrupt you.
Yeah.
What I was hearing was that the water that you banked, you weren't able to receive any of it. But you're saying you are able to receive some of it?
That's different. This is transfer water that I moved around to other agencies, and I called that back. Basically, there was a lot of water that I gave to Santa Clara or transferred to them in 2011. The banked water that you're talking about is in semi-tropic. That's the water that we put 3 years ago. We put that water down in semi-tropic, which is down in by Wasco. We put that water down in there for the Hollister Urban Area project. When we had some extra M&I water that year, we took 5,000 acre-feet and put the 5,000 acre-feet down there. Well, by the time you get the transfers in there, it only ended up being 4,500. But you're right, no, I can't get that back this year.
All right.
There's so little water in the system right now that the water moving north to south, there's a call on all of it already, so there's no trading that could be done. The way that we get that water back is we'll take some of our water and send it to the semi-tropic down in Wasco. They put it in their groundwater basin, but in order for me to get that back, there has to be water moving north to south that isn't already been earmarked for somebody else, and there's just very little water this year.
All right, thank you.
With the state and the federal projects delivering zero allocations, there's no water moving around. So it's this year. While it's going to be very dry. You know, we were able to take some actions this last year to bring water back, so there will be some water that we can deliver to help keep things balanced. Next year, it's going to be a major issue, though. The federal and state projects are in such a deficit right now that even if it does rain the rest of this year, our allocations next year are going to be incredibly low, just because they've got to make up for so much losses that they've got right now. The way that the federal project works is that there are 3 different categories of water that have priority to the agricultural water. There's an exchange contractors, there's the water for the fish, and then there's the refuges that have to have water for those. Those have priority in their deliveries before we'll get any water at all. So right now, they're behind on being able to even meet those obligations. So even if it continues to rain this year, they're still behind on those, and they're not going to be able to make that up to be able to make those obligations. So we're going to be stuck at a zero allocation unless just something absolutely incredible happens. They're looking right now at the pumping plant in Tracy that gets the water out of the delta to bring it into San Luis Reservoir. They normally have 4 or 5 pumps running there. At this time of year, there's a single pump running right now, and it's not even running at capacity. That's going to continue through at least August. So there will be very little water that's going to be able to be pumped. They're going to be just managing to try to keep San Luis Reservoir from going empty at this point. We're looking at the San Luis low point of occurring as early as June this year, and maybe as late as July, and then it's going to stay incredibly low until September or October, when the demands drop off and they're able to start moving some water, what little water that they have. So what that means for us is that moving into next fall, there's still going to be a very low San Luis Reservoir, and they're going to have limited capacity to be able to start to refill that reservoir, and that's what we have to have in order to be able to get a decent allocation. So with the very low San Luis Reservoir, we already know that next year is going to be a very low allocation year for the project. The transfers that Margie were talking about, and all the work that the state has been doing to streamline the transfer process, that's all very good, and it helps when there's water to transfer. There is no water to transfer this year, so I mean it's going to have it looks good, but there's limited benefit there with that just because there is no water. We normally were able to in a normal year, even in a dry year, to be able to get maybe 2,000 or 3,000, 4,000 acre-feet of water from different agencies to transfer around. We're looking at probably not being able to get any of that this year. So, if there's any other questions,
Supervisor Patella?
Yeah, Jeff, thank you very much for coming in and listening to a couple hours of our meeting. Really appreciate it. I just want to commend the Water District for their real good work in the management of all the water resources in the county. I don't think you could do a much better job, and trying to position the county is to have some water in a dry year like this in a cycle that we're in, and there's no end in sight. Being in agriculture myself, I'm real nervous, not for just this year, but coming years. People don't have any idea the economic devastation that the lack of water is going to mean to this state and maybe even to the whole country in ways of added food costs and jobs. Just as we're coming out of our recession, I think it's hurt a lot of people. Question I have for you, though, it was very disappointing, I think, Friday. Anybody who knows anything about water and is so dependent on water had the big wig political people in Los Banos and Fresno, the president, the governor, and even the president saying that, well, he's not a step in the middle of the environmentalists or the municipalities or the agriculture. You guys hash it out on your own, and I believe that's, I probably shouldn't expect anything different. But what locally, do we have an opportunity to maybe get some money to, we have a lot of water that's being discharged by the city of Hollister, I think 3.5 million gallons per day. It's too high in salts, but is there a project that could come online sooner than later? Because I think this is be an ongoing problem. If we could pull some of those salts out, would that be something that could be used and a little bit more aggressively than what we're doing right now?
The Hollister Urban Area Project, that's the project that's going to do that. One of the benefits of that, delivering that higher quality water to the city of Hollister, is that the water coming out of the wastewater plant is going to have lower total dissolved solids or salts. So it's going to go from about 1,200 down to around 7 in the first phase. So that water, and as a grower, that 700 parts per million is pretty acceptable. It's better than you're going to get out in San Juan Valley. So there'll be about maybe, depending upon the season and how the demand works, there'll be maybe 12 to 1,800 acre feet of additional water a year that will be provided from that project for the recycled water for agricultural use. I forgot to mention when Margie did say that the water district is going to be implementing a drought emergency this evening. We're asking them to declare that. So one of the things that it's going to be a stage 1, and that's what we're going to be starting at stage 1, which is just voluntary conservation and looking for about a 15% reduction is what we're going to be asking. The city and Sunny Slope are going to be following suit with the district and doing the same thing.
And one last follow-up question. And salt is a big issue for my well in the middle of San Juan Valley. It's just ridiculously salty. I've seen it change over the years. It's gotten much, much worse. And I'm not a big fan of water softeners. People put salt in just adding to the load. Should we be a little bit more aggressive as far as trying to eliminate softeners altogether?
The water district believes you should, yes. In part of the agreement that we have with everybody, the city on Sunny Slope, is that when the project comes online to deliver the higher quality water, they are supposed to start to look at water softener ordinances to restrict the water softeners. That's a tough political issue, though, trying to.
I know it is, and it has everything to do with our next 2 items on the agenda after this item. Thank you very much, Jeff.
All right.
Actually, Mr. Chair, I'm kind of getting a refresh course because I was on the water district back then when you were just a regular engineer. The water softeners is not the main. It's not the biggest source of salts down in our basin, right?
Well, naturally the basin is salty.
Yeah.
Just by the geologic structures that form the San Benito River, that are all marine sediments. So, and that's the main source of recharge for our basin is the San Benito River. So when the water travels down the San Benito River and it rains and it moves through there, it picks up the calcium and the magnesium in those marine sediments and it dissolves it and brings it into the basin. So naturally it's salty. Everything we do, because it's a closed basin, and when we talk about a closed basin, it's, there's water moves into it, but not very much water moves out. The only water that moves out of our basin is through the Chittenden Gap, and there's a geologic structure there that comes up and forms a barrier, basically like a bowl. So the only time that the water leaves is when the groundwater level gets high enough and it rolls into the Pajaro River. So what happens is the water in our, particularly in San Juan Basin, gets trapped there, and just what evaporative process and using the water just keeps getting saltier and saltier and saltier. You use water softeners being discharged from the wastewater plant. Add to that the soil amendments from agriculture, because you've got to put gypsum on the soil to keep it loose enough so that it doesn't bind up. That adds to the salts into the basin. So everything we do adds to that. And there's nothing that's pretty difficult to turn it around. The only thing that you can do is slow the increase of it. So again, the Hollister Urban Area Project is going to be doing that. It's going to be bringing higher quality water so that the water that's discharged is actually better than what's that's in the basin. And the same with the San Felipe water. Bringing the San Felipe water in, is about 300 parts per million. That, mixing in with the natural basin water, helps to dilute some of those salts too.
Well, shoot, a 700 TDS, that's a damn good number for a farmer.
It's much better than what they've got, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Jeff.
I have
Okay.
Jeff, thank you so much for this presentation, and I realize the serious risks that we are having to deal with. I want to know, so we're going to declare in this county a disaster then, a local disaster?
It's not a disaster, it's a drought emergency.
So a
it's
drought
not
emergency.
It's not a
so
disaster.
that means that because of that, then there will be opportunity for farmers and people that work or supply to farmers to be able to apply for funds?
Well, the governor did that in his state of emergency that he declared. With that, so including
that already.
Yeah, including San Benito County in there covers that. The district's action doesn't help the farmers, just making people aware that there's a water shortage and to try to conserve.
Okay, well, that's really good because we need to have a plan then, and I guess the governor has directed us that we have to have a management plan. I mean, telling us to take 20% or use 20% less, obviously really for the average homeowner.
San Benito County, through the district and work with the county and in the past, we do have a groundwater management plan.
Okay, good. So then
we're
already in place with that.
Yes, we have a groundwater management plan in place.
Okay, and I know you have done an excellent job of trying to provide public awareness so that, I mean, I got rid of my water softener and I got rid of my in-laws one because I've been educated on what the damage. So I think we need to just really make a push for increasing that so people there's greater awareness.
You needed to have better quality water in order to convince the people to do that. So that's where we're moving.
Okay.
And kind of touching on that too, that we will be able to access that 4,500 acre feet of water that we've got down there. We just won't be able to do it this year. That represents, that water that's down in there in semi-tropic represents an entire year's worth of water to operate the water treatment plant. So that's, and we're going to continue to expand those opportunities when we get them. So.
And we are a county and a state of wanting our yards to look beautiful and a lot of lawn area. And I don't know that there's a benefit in having a green lawn other than it looks pretty. And I'm really wondering if maybe that is an area that we really should push to try to avoid people having these lushy, including everybody. So tell me what your thoughts are on that.
Well, the Water District has already initiated that. We have, if you look on our website under the WRA, there are drought-tolerant landscaping plans. 2 years ago, I asked Sean, the WRA coordinator, to go out and have a landscape architect draw up some general plans for drought-tolerant landscaping. So there's 3 or 4 plans that you can look on there, and if one of them, if you want to use that as a model, you can do that. There's programs that we've got for reducing water use through the WRA. You just need to people need to contact Sean. It's available on our webpage. So.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Actually, one more question, Mr. Chair. Sean, speaking of Sean, I was having a conversation with Sean about 3 or 4 years ago, and we both kind of came up with the word, and it's been out there for a while, and that's called gray water, in which you implement policies of development in which you develop the tools to to capture that water that's either would have gone into the sewers, and that water can be used for non-portable use.
There are methods to do that, where you could use it in your, capture the gray water in your own yard and use it in your own yard. It's pretty difficult to take it out and use it any place but on your yard. On the flip side of that, though, if the water, the way that we're setting this up, if the water ends up, it's going to end up in the wastewater. If you don't use it in gray water, that's going to end up getting, most of it's going to end up getting recycled anyway. So.
Yeah. Jeff, I too want to thank you and want to thank Margie for all your efforts.
All right.
I want to mention that yourself, myself, and then your director, Joe Tucardo, at the end of last year, we went down to Jefferson School because there was concerns by the ranchers down there. Their wells were already starting to go dry. And so I want to thank Steve and his staff. They've been addressing, and you two, been addressing Stonegate, making those residents aware of the less water that's going to be available, and we have a plan in place to get Stonegate through this. I've been in, and I think we all received the email from Sean about the gray water. I know years ago I was going to try and divert my gray water to use it for landscaping, and I was told by the county we could not do that. So I'm wondering if that's something we need to look at, and I'm not sure if that would take building department, environmental health. I'm not sure where we need to look at that, but I think that might be something we want to look at in the future to see if we, especially in the county area, where it'd be easy to divert gray water from the septic tank into something that can be used for landscaping. I've also contacted Congressman Farr's office and Senator Canella's office, and Margie actually mentioned some of the programs that I received from Senator Canella's office, but from Congressman Farr's office, there's a USDA disaster program, a low-cost insurance program. So I just want to let the public know that these programs are out there. They can contact us if they need help. But like you were saying, Jeff, this is probably the serious we've been since the 70s, and we just don't know which way it's going to go. If it, whether we'll have a miracle March and miracle May and kind of get us through this year, and then it'll finally change to where we'll start getting some rain next year, or if this drought will continue through next year. We just don't know. So we definitely need to start going forward with some steps in conserving water. With that, I will open it up to the public. If there's anybody from the public that.
Marty Richmond again from Hollister. I have a question for Jeff that he can answer after I leave the podium. He mentioned there were 3 priorities. I got the fishes and the refuge. The first one he mentioned, I don't know what that program is and how it works. Maybe he could just explain it really quickly. And I will leave it with this comment, and this is not from the water people, it's from me personally, so they may disagree. Many years ago, I bought a computer-driven softener, because if without a softener in the water I had, you had to shovel the water out of the sink because it wouldn't pour. It came out in chunks. And that reduced my salt usage by about, I would say, 75%. So if you do need a softener and you have one of those old-fashioned softeners that just run on a timer, please get rid of that, okay? You will find you'll save a lot of money in salt, and you'll use a lot less salt if you buy one of the new computer-driven softeners. This is my personal opinion, that a good one that keeps track of how much water you use and what rate, what's in it. So that's just a personal recommendation for me. If you have to have a softener, the water district may disagree and don't want to have one at all. And although I give him a hard time all the time on the cost of the water, I certainly understand the water shortage, so save water. But I would like to know, again, what that first item was that you mentioned.
Yeah. What Marty is speaking of are the exchange contractors. The exchange contractors are the growers that had property along the San Joaquin River, that when the Bureau of Reclamation put in the Friant Division down to deliver water to the Bakersfield area, what they did was they diverted water off of the San Joaquin River, and it denied the growers along the San Joaquin River the access to that water. So what they had to do was the Bureau of Reclamation had to replace that amount of water that they diverted, and that's that obligation that they have. So their water, instead of coming down the San Joaquin River like it used to, it now comes through the Delta. And that's one of the first obligations that the Bureau has, is to make that water up for the water that they diverted to them. On the water softener issue, Marty is correct. Ideally, we would like everybody to get rid of their water softeners, but as an alternative to that, there are the water softeners that are demand generated, like that Marty spoke of, that are an alternative that we find are acceptable. And the Water District actually does, through the WRA, have rebates that you can apply for if you get rid of one of those old timer-based water softeners.
I have a quick question on that. I have a water softener. I just can't do without it out there where I live. But I don't buy the $5 salt. I buy the $21 salt, potassium salt, and it states that it's environmentally sound. Is that pretty much true?
Yes, it's a much better alternative. But it's not as good as nothing.
Yeah, I wish I could talk to my wife into eliminating the softener. You talk about the politics of it. The home politics is what beats me up. I'm not afraid of you, Marty.
Well, I'll say I went 20 years without a soft water system, and my pipes were just about corroded up.
Yeah.
Galvanized pipe in the house, and when we moved the house, we put in one. So I don't think I'll be taking it out for the same reason you won't be taking yours out. Richard?
Yeah, Richard Betancourt, 4140 Southside Road. I just have a question. I don't hear anything about seeding the cloud. There must be a reason for that.
Have you seen any clouds to seed?
A few.
When Janelle was saying we had 262 days of sunshine in her report, I was thinking she needed to up that amount a little bit. Anyone else from the public like to address this item? Okay, I'll bring it back to the board. I think we were just receiving a report. I don't think there's any action to this, correct? Okay.
That's correct.
We'll
But
move
I
on.
have one more question, Mr.
Sure.
Chair, only because, is Jeff still here? Yeah. Jeff, what can San Benito County do to help your efforts? Should we pass a resolution to just build on what you're trying to do and make more?
Yeah, you could. I mean, anytime that you can make the public more aware of conserving water and the resources that we've got, that's always a help. Education is the key.
I agree.
So.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Supervisor Vitello?
Obviously, the drought is a hot topic right now, but this is be an issue throughout the whole summer and into the fall, and I think that would help the public awareness that we keep this in the forefront. And also, I hope that between the water agency, the two cities, some of these private water companies, that we work together to meet the needs of the public, and the public also works towards conservation in a big way this year, because this is not just end of rainy season and hope that next year is to be better. We could be in a cycle that is a prolonged, decade-long drought.
Supervisor Reeves.
Yeah, and with that said, my comments, I'm very curious. I read an article over the weekend, I believe it was an article Sunday in the San Francisco Chronicle, that talked about should the drought persist. It talked about our options, and the one option that this article talked about was the process of the desalination and the possibility that funding could be available, although it would be very expensive, for future plants throughout our coast. I know they talked about one in the county of Monterey. I know that there's one already in the city of Sand. So what process would we play if that were to move forward?
Desalination is incredibly expensive.
Very controversial, I know,
Even
but
if
it's an
you-
option.
Yeah, even if you live along the coast, which is like, if you're going to build a desal plant, it's got to be along the coast because you got to have access to the water. You have to, and the other thing you have to have is some place to discharge the brine that comes off of it. And so, typically those are always located, someplace close to the ocean. The cost is incredible. I mean, relative to all the other options that you've got for water, you can do a desalination plant for an urban area because you can spread the cost over a lot of other, a lot of customers. Trying to do it for agriculture just would never work. You're looking at upwards of $3,000 an acre foot for water. That's if you have it on the coast. If you have, then when you have to build a pipeline from the coast all the way to San Benito County, that's about another $300 or $400 million to build that pipeline to get it here. It's a non-starter as far as cost is concerned. It just you can't support it.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah.
I just want to recommend, Mr. Chair, that we go ahead and move forward with the resolution. I think it's important that we reinforce their efforts and do what we can to educate the public.
If the direction is that you would like to have a declaration supporting all the water district's actions, and of course the governor's, we are already named in the state of emergency, but we could do something along the lines of a conservation resolution. If you would like me to do that, I can prepare something.
Yeah.
Margie, I think we're aware that we are named in the governor's declaration, but I think it's the wish of the board that we just kind of
Sure.
reinforce that to
Absolutely.
the citizens of San Benito County.
Mr. Chair, and I think that we should also, once a month, send reminders to the public of how we can conserve water in cooperation with the city hall, so in terms when they send their water bills, their if PG&E bills are sent out too.
I thought I understood that the city of Hollister is already putting something in their water bills already, and I believe San Benito Water District is also. So I think the information's getting out to the people that have the water people that they're receiving the water resources from are putting that information out.
Okay, perfect.
Very good. Okay.
There's also a website, Save Our Water, Save Our H2O on our county website, and it's available on the state website also about how to conserve water, take measures to conserve water. So I'll put that resolution together for you for next meeting.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Jeff. And Jeff, I want to thank you, Supervisor Patello, thank you for sitting through the 2 hours today, or you also, I think, sat through 2 hours or 3 hours during our last meeting and didn't even make it up to the podium, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, we're at...
Actually, can I cut you off, Ray?
No, that's fine.
Just a word to the public. We are actually going to go through the lunch hour, so we're going to go straight through to 1 o'clock. We have a scheduled closed session item at 1 o'clock, and just to let you know, we're going to go straight through to 1 o'clock and then have our break. So, okay, apologize for that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, we're at item number 21. This is going to be brought to us by Bob Braitman. He is our LAFCO Executive Officer, and he's been kind enough to come down this morning still to talk about new development within our county, also to addressing our sphere of influence and touching on annexation fees. So I appreciate him coming down. Thank you, Bob, to present to your board.
You're welcome. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I've been your LAFCO executive for about 6 months. I think this is the first time I've actually addressed the Board of Supervisors. I want to congratulate Mr. De La Cruz and his wife on how many years?
25.
My wife, Mary, has given me 17 perfect years of marriage. Out of 46, so that's not bad. By the
way that works every time. If you say that to a woman, she'll say, "It's so nice to hear a husband talk that way." Then I tell her, anyway, my wife's heard the joke, so.
I love it, Jerry.
Yeah, June 1st of 1968, so that's a little while ago. Thank you for having me here today. I was interested in an item that was on your agenda earlier, having to do with formation of County Service Area 55. And you adopted an agreement whereby the landowners, present and future, consent when they buy the property to annex to the city of Hollister. Why does that make sense? Well, if you read the second, the following on item on that same item, it said, we're doing this because it would delay the project to annex it to the city of Hollister. I was surprised when I became aware of that particular project, Creekside 5, because it's a subdivision of homes in the unincorporated area at the end of a city street. You can't get to the property without driving through the city of Hollister to get to there. Now that means as long as it remains unincorporated, it's going to be the county sheriff and fire and so forth that have to patrol the city. Those folks are disenfranchised. They don't get to vote in city council elections, even though what the city does affects them. So I was kind of confused by the reality I found when I came here, whereby the county seems to routinely approve residential subdivisions within the sphere of influence, LAFCO adopted sphere for a city of Hollister. A sphere of influence, according to the note which I sent to your county administrator, is a plan for the physical boundaries and service area of a local agency. So here we have the city of Hollister with a sphere of influence within which your Board of Supervisors routinely approves, routinely from what I can see, residential subdivisions. And there doesn't seem to be any incentive for the property owners involved to annex to the city. Upon further examination, I found part of that problem has to do with the property tax exchange agreement that seems to exist. Under California law, I cannot accept an application to annex land to a city and issue a certificate of filing until there's a property tax exchange agreement whereby the city council and the Board of Supervisors agree. Well, in the case of annexations to Hollister, from what I can see, is, and I don't pretend to understand the reasons for this, is besides adjusting the tax apportionment factors, in other words, every piece of property is in a tax rate area, and that tax rate area is a series of tax apportionment factors. The county gets a share, the school districts get a share, and so forth. When you annex land to a city, you don't increase the 1% property tax. Everybody has to remain within the 1%, so you adjust them a bit. And the law says you can adjust those whose service area or service responsibility is being changed. So when you annex to a city, the city's going to get a share of the property tax. The county share is going to be slightly reduced because it's giving up certain obligations. Well, apparently in this county, that's not enough. You have a property tax agreement with whereby the city has to pay the county what I think I've been informed is more than $8,000 per residential unit. In my humble judgment, that doesn't make too much sense. Number one, if the property is developed in the county anyway, you never get the $9,000. And it simply prevents, because the city says it's not our money, Mr. Developer, you pay $9,000 a lot, so we can pay it to the county. And the developer says, I'm resistant to doing that, so is there any way I can develop without annexing to the city? And then they end up with a subdivision like this one. And there are others as well that I'm aware of. So the development occurs anyway. The county doesn't receive the per lot payment, and I really think that somehow needs to be corrected. I'd be happy to work with the city and county staff to come up with a property tax exchange agreement that's fair to all concerned and doesn't create a disincentive to property be annexed to the city, which would otherwise logically be annexed to the city. I have other examples of properties which are coming to LAFCO to receive approval from the county of some nature, either form a county service area or something else, which are logically part of the city, and why we can't say to the developer early in the system, hey, apply to the city, don't apply to the county. Why? Because you're in the city's sphere of influence. And once the homes are built and they call the police are going to come from the city because they're closest, and the county sheriff's going to come also because it's unincorporated. There could be 2 responses for fire protection. The people who buy that home are going to live in a home with a park nearby. It's a city park, yet they don't contribute property taxes to the city. So it's just an area which, as your new LAFCO executive officer, I was surprised to see, and I think there's a need to give some attention to. Be happy to do whatever I can to assist you, and I appreciate your county administrator placing this on the agenda. I'm available anytime to talk about these things, to work with your staff and the city staff. I understand you're coming up with a property tax exchange agreement with the city of San Juan Bautista, which will make more sense. So I'm really here to offer those few words and to answer any questions you may have related to this subject.
Supervisor Keller?
Yeah, I'm Mr. Braitman, welcome to our meeting, and being part of LAFCO, I've heard you speak that we are a little bit different than a lot of areas as far as how we manage our growth and tax revenues between the different agencies, and this is something that, since I've been on the board, has been a problem, and it's been very, very complex to try to resolve it. Maybe Joe Paul will get up after you and talk about some of his experiences and how hard the administrative staff has worked as well on just this issue. And I would like to have another alternative. I really, my background was with the fire department here in Hollister, and that this is kind of how we make agencies work together in a way. You get fire, city and county services, and it's really not very efficient. It really isn't, and I think we could put together a better growth plan for our county if we had something a little bit more dialed in and going into the future. And so I appreciate you willing to offer up ideas. I don't know what could be changed, but maybe at least you coming from other LAFCO agencies, that something might fit us. As you know, we receive a very small portion of the property tax dollar back from Sacramento, and that kind of adds to the revenue sharing issue between the two cities and us.
One alternative, and just as that, you find a tax rate area inside the city, and you say, okay, when you annex to the city, that's a share that you get in the annexed area. It's comparable to properties within the city. Nobody I've talked to can quite explain to me why the city and the county agreed to a deal which basically stops annexations. I come from originally a county called Ventura, and I was a LAFCO executive there when I worked in the county administrative office. And the county has a philosophy, and every city has adopted the same philosophy, that say urban uses ought to be in cities whenever practical. And you have a sphere of influence for a city of Hollister here, but it doesn't seem like there's an agreement or an understanding that within the sphere, urban uses ought to occur within the city. So we end up developing urbanized areas within a city sphere of influence, which receive either double services, or the county has to maintain a little piece of road when it should be a city street. So just an area which I think some attention should be given to, and I'd be happy to help. I know you're a supervisor today, but you're the chairman of LAFCO to me. Any other questions for me? I'm available.
Supervisor Rivas?
Yeah, I agree with what's been said. I think this is extremely important, especially when we're in the process of updating our general plan. I would like to see this, we talk so much about processes, ERPs on the fast track, and this the T-bids on a fast. This needs to be on a fast track before anything, in my opinion. I think resolving these issues prior to adopting a revised general plan is critical, especially when we talk about, when you look at the general plan, where you have a balance between residential growth, and our commercial growth. I mean, this is unacceptable. I have these little pockets in these CSAs that cause all these problems down the road. I mean, this needs to be addressed ASAP. You know, in my opinion. So, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for the presentation. I always enjoy. I know I've been to LAFCO. I'm an alternate. I've been there a couple times. I always enjoy your reports.
Well, thank you.
So thank
Well,
you.
just to add to what you're saying, let's assume that when you annex land, the city gets 10% of the county share of the property tax or whatever it works out. That means that you get 80% of the property tax that you would have gotten anyway, but the assessed value goes sky high. In other words, what you want to do is have development occur so there's more growth, assessed value, adequate services for folks. And being in the city helps you because then you're not the municipal service provider. I appreciate your comments. Thank you.
I'll open this up to anybody in the public. Oh,
Joe.
Joe Paul, I'm sorry.
As your county auditor, I'm not here to defend the, the master tax agreements that we have agreed to with the city of Hollister, but I could provide some background. The reason why the master tax agreements, what the terms of those agreements were created by basically, the administrative office with, my help and the auditor's office, with the same, city management and the fiscal people at the city of Hollister. The number one reason why this has turned out to be a real issue for the board is because planning and public works was never invited to the table for that discussion. And I was really pleased that CAO Espinoza brought those parties to the table with the city of San Juan as we finished that conversation and the adoption of that master tax agreement. So these are real critical, important departments to be sitting at that table because it turns out that land use policy is not just fiscal. It has, fiscal is a part of it. At the time when the initial master tax agreement was created, a fiscal study was commissioned, which the city and the county had come together and shared the cost in determining what are the costs of development. And so it was determined that residential development at the assessed values at that time were actually costing both the city and the county. It was a net loss as far as the expenditures that are associated with one unit of development and the revenues that come in. It was it's a negative number. So at that time, it was determined, well, there needs to be some sort of way to keep the county, maybe not whole, but keep it kind of neutral to development, especially as it occurs in the city. Except that in theory, that didn't work out so well because, as Mr. Braitman has, pointed out, it basically became a policy of no annexations, or it really diminished the policy of having urbanized growth occur in the cities of Hollister, which has always been, I think, the county's position is that large developments, urban developments, should really occur in an orderly fashion around the cities or in the cities. So, I'm glad to hear Mr. Braitman bring up this subject because it really is the heart of the matter that has been, here before this board many times is this master tax agreement that is, maybe poor land use policy. So I was glad to see that we have Public Works and Planning part of this process, and it should, I think, as we go forward with this discussion, if the board, so wishes to do so, that those departments be included in the future discussions.
Any questions of Joe Paul? Joe Paul, I have maybe one question. This master tax plan agreement, I always refer to it as annexation fee. This thing has been around for 20 or 30 years, hasn't it, between the county and the city?
Well, we're on our second master tax agreement that I know of, that we just recently, last couple of years,
Right.
I believe it was 2010 it was supposed to, become effective as of that year. And the first one was adopted in the year 2000.
Oh, it's been, okay. I guess I was thinking it was longer than that. But I think it has definitely had the effect of people don't want to, go into the city. It become too burdensome to the developer, and I think we definitely do have to look at it. Because it was not part of the agreement we did with San Juan, correct?
No, that annexation fee was not part of that agreement
Yeah.
at San Juan.
Okay.
Instead, it was dealt with in how the tax sharing occurred with the increment.
Right.
The growth in values versus the base. The county still returns all the, retains all the base value. So it's all future, it's future growth, future improvements, future assessed value as that growth in the assessed values.
Right.
That's really what it is.
Okay, well now, Bob, if you want to go back up.
Your memory is good. Let me, just for sake of the record, say what happened. Before Proposition 13 occurred, property taxes from one area to another differed depending on what tax rate areas you're in, depending on what public agencies you're in. If you annex to a fire district, there may be a fire protection district tax that you didn't pay if you're not in. And so we didn't have a uniform property tax rates. They differed based upon the array of local agencies. Prop 13 changed all that. They did what it says is property taxes from now on are limited to 1% of the fair value market value of your property, irrespective of what array of taxing agencies. It used to be that the county general fund got the same property tax rate countywide. Now it doesn't. Your tax apportionment factor differs for the county general fund depending on what tax rate area you're in. The other thing Prop 13 did, besides saying taxes are limited to 1%, as apportioned by law, which gave the legislature the authority to determine how to allocate property taxes. And then went back on a 3-year average and gave everybody a tax rate area. Now, when you annex to a city or to a special district or make any other boundary change, you're still limited to that 1% value, so you have to adjust the tax rate areas. The other thing Prop 13 did, as we all know, is it froze assessed values. Basically, as long as you own the property, they can't go up more than a certain percentage a year. I pay 1/4 the property tax that my neighbor pays. Why? Because I've owned my house longer than that house, with same value home, and yet I pay 4 times what my other neighbor pays. The problem with county government is property taxes aren't the revenue source they used to be, and they won't be in the future, because as long as you have long-term ownership of property, the assessed value doesn't grow, so counties have to look at other sources of revenue. But your recollection's correct of how we got into this situation. It wasn't just the last couple of years. It happened when Prop 13 became effective, and we're still dealing with that today. That means if you have a $200,000 house in San Francisco with every conceivable public service, or a $200,000 house in Modoc County where you see the sheriff every 2 weeks, you pay the same property tax. So property taxes you pay are sort of unrelated anymore to the services you receive.
That's right.
government lesson number 1.
Thank you, Paul. Okay, I will open it up to the public now. Is there anybody from the public that would like to speak on this item? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I think we do have to review what we've been doing in the past with this, tax sharing revenue agreements with the 2 cities, and if there's a way that we could better structure it, I think we seriously have to look at it, as Supervisor Rivas pointed out, that we're in the process of updating our general plan. It really has to go hand in hand, and we're right on the crest of some significant growth in our county, and we better have our act together.
Okay. Staff, you have direction?
Yeah, we have a direction.
Okay,
Yeah.
very good.
I want to also just echo the statements earlier with regards to staff. I want to thank Steve Whittree, Byron, and Joe Paul, and Matt Granger, as well as even Bob. We've met many times about this matter prior. So I just, we're limited on staffing, and they made it a special effort to meet regularly with this particular item. So I want to thank them publicly.
Very good.
Okay.
All right.
So
move on to general plan update.
Yeah. So again, this has been an ongoing item for your board. This month we have an update, special report given to us by Byron Turner, our interim planning director, and he has, I believe, a PowerPoint presentation for your board.
Yes, today I'm just going to introduce for you Michael Groves and Ashley Hefner from EMC Planning Group. They are your general plan consultants working on this, so I'll turn it over to them to give their presentation.
Thank you, Byron. Mr. Chairman, board members, my name is Michael Groves. I'm the president of EMC Planning Group in Monterey. Thank you for having us. And when I got here today, it looked like it was beat-up consultant day, so I thought I was going to ask Byron to maybe shift the program to another day. Wouldn't be a good day to be here.
At least you showed up.
So we want to give you a quick update. We do have some decisions we want to make today. So Ashley Hefner is from EMC Planning Group. She is working with me on this. I want you to know that I am taking this on personally with Ashley. We have 16 people in our office, and the 2 of us are going to take this on personally. So I've been very committed to this county and very engaged with this county for a long time, and we want to make sure this goes the way you want it to go. We want to be clear with you that we want good communication between us. So if there's any issues going on, anything you're concerned about, please communicate with us and let us know, and we'll take care of it. Working with us as a part of the team will be Hatchmont McDonald and Ascent Environmental. Those 2 firms will be assisting us during the process with regard to both traffic peer review and doing some of the air quality and GHG peer review from your previous work that you had. Let's talk a little bit about the process. And before I do that, I'd like to thank Byron and thank the board for selecting EMC Planning Group and trusting us to take you through this process and complete the process for you. We're going to talk a little bit about, really today is kind of a kickoff and procedures in terms of process. What are we going to do in terms of the tasks that we're going to take on? What's the process? What are the milestones? And what is the timeline? We'd also like to receive some feedback, and we'll flip to the next slide and look at today's agenda, introduction and review of chronology of events. We're going to skip over the chronology a little bit, just go through that quickly and get really down to the point of what was the board's general plan direction. What have they done in previous actions that have directed the general plan? What flexibility have you asked for in terms of policies? Landowner requests that I've mentioned to a number of board members over time. That's a big issue we need to deal with. The EIR, traffic, air quality, and GHG. the process timeline, any tasks that may have to occur after the process or are add-ons to the process, and then some direction for a Planning Commission Board of Supervisor workshop that we'd like to have approximately 30 days from now. I'm going to have Ashley talk a little bit about the chronology and before we do that, where we want decision points today are really with regard to the landowner requests and setting a board public workshop with the Planning Commission. So those are really the two things that we're asking for direction on today. Other than that, the rest of it could come at the next workshop.
Good afternoon, Chair and Board. I'm not going to go through the chronology since you were all there and part of the process, and you do have it in front of you. Instead, I'll just go through the events that led to the policy direction. So the last direction the board gave was in August of 2003, where you directed staff to keep the new community study areas, including development of the narratives when moving forward with the general plan. And also, you opted to keep the mandatory elements of the general plan. In July 2012, you directed staff and the consultants at the time to include more flexibility in the general plan policies, and also to remove the notion that the new community study areas would constitute unplanned growth if someone were to come forward in the future with a development project. Also, in that year, the board moved to approve the traffic level of service from C to D, and to also, again, include more flexibility and to change the wording of unplanned growth for that same reason. And then in 2009, one of the most important directions was the direction to staff to use the AMBAG forecast for traffic modeling and calculations. So I'd like to just touch on some of the flexibility that the board had requested for policies in the general plan. So we've started incorporating some of those directions into the general plan document itself. We did bring a handout to show you that Michael will pass out. What we've done at this point is gone through first the EIR and what changes to the general plan were recommended from mitigations to general plan policies as well as language. We've also started to go through the letters received during the first circulation of the EIR and incorporate firstly any clarifications on facts and information received from a range of public agencies and also from members of the public. So up to this point, we've only had time to incorporate letters from the Business Council. That's only one out of 30 letters, and we did that first because that letter seemed to incorporate a bulk of comments that were in other letters. So it's a good first chunk of information for you to be able to look at until the next time we see you. So again, we're not asking for any action today, but we are asking for you to be prepared to give us direction at the public workshop with the Planning Commission. So you can expect that there will be additional revisions to the general plan in addition to what you have in front of you, because we'll be looking through all of the comments received from the public. And you know, this document that you have in front of you is just, you know, to set everything out, you know, in front of you so that you really have a chance to see the full picture of comments received. So I think that what we plan on doing at the workshop is to have a Word version, a working Word version of this document that you have in front of you up on the projector, and in real time we'll actually go through each change, have the board discuss it, and have the board sign off yes or no, or let's make this revision, and check that off and move on to the next one. So, you know, this only has the exact sections that comments were made on, and anything else was eliminated just for the purposes of, having the areas that you need to focus your attention on. So if you don't see a section of the general plan in this document, it's because there were no comments yet that we've gone over. In addition, we'll be drafting narratives for the new community study areas that we'll have ready for you to review for the workshop. I'll hand it back over to Michael.
So I just really want to emphasize and repeat a little bit of what Ashley said. Is I've got this big stamp on my forehead that says a work in progress, which I'm always a work in progress, but this, I really want to emphasize that stamp that this is a work in progress. So as it's handed out to the public, we're just starting the process of going through all of the comments that you received on both the general plan and the EIR, and starting to craft language that would try to address those comments both in the general plan, eventually in the EIR. We're not starting the EIR until we get approval from this board that you're satisfied with the changes in the general plan. So it's a stepwise process, if you will, to do that. And so the timeline about how this process will move when we get to timeline is going to be largely dependent on when the board decides that they're ready to put their direction on it and say we're good with the comments and we're good with the direction that you've put into the plan.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I have a question, if I may.
Yes.
Thank you. On your previous slide, it says here that because this is a big major issue for me, the new community study areas need to be drafted and sent to the board for a review before the March workshop. And how are you develop those narratives? Is it just something from your gut feeling, what you've heard from comments from the board and what, as our discussions were related to the community study areas? Or is this something that you're draft up and then probably go to the workshop and hear input from the Board of Supervisors and the Planning Commission?
We are trying to collect information that we've heard from the hearings that you've already had and from past actions and letters, et cetera, and collect that information and craft some kind of a paragraph or two or a page, depending on what it's like. And what the direction I heard, and Robert, I believe, started this conversation, the direction I heard was essentially, why was this area selected? It's really a why question. Why did the GPAC decide that this area should have some kind of an asterisk on it or be designated as a new community area? And give some input, whether it has to do with services, whether it has to do with transportation, whether it has to do with a specific land use type, whatever. Again, these areas are not being, we're not saying it's going to be a specific land use type of anything. We're not changing the general plan designation. We're not changing the zoning at this point in time. They're what I would call as future study areas in a sense. There are areas where a specific plan could be prepared, and you have full discretion on that, plus full environmental review on that when that comes forward to you. So the goal is really to say, on your map, there are some asterisk areas, there's some special areas that the GPAC identified as potential growth areas where growth could occur. We don't even know what type of growth that is, but we want some reasoning behind that in terms of why they were designated.
Okay, because
I hope I articulated that well.
I think that's the most critical thing of concern that I've heard, is how we're going to structure that, and it's kind of a little bit of reassuring that they're not even considered as special study areas. That makes it, gives me a little bit more comfort zone. So I'm really looking forward to the narratives and that discussion with the board members.
So we can again, you're in the process. So we're in process. So we can add language, modify language as we choose to identify what those areas are and how they came about as we go about it. But I understood that as being a major concern of the board, how we craft that. And so we will want to bring that to you at the next meeting. We would like to have some of that to you before the meeting. So the idea is we're getting you this piece today. It gives you a lot of the strike-through underline of policy language to get a start on it. So you got, let's say, 20, 30 days to take a look at that. You got a little bit of time. At the next meeting, what we would like to do is basically have Ashley work on the computer with you in terms of actually going through policy to policy on those. Any change, no, I don't have any change, let's move on. We'll walk through it, then we'll go to the narratives, and we'll look at the narratives and talk through the narratives, and then we'll go through, and we'll actually make the changes right there in front of you. And that way you can actually craft it, if you'd like to, in that workshop. You know, if it gets to be too burdensome, we can set another workshop, or we can do it and bring it back to you. You know, but we can see how that works for you in terms of a process. But I think it's good to be, it's good open policy to put it on the board, have you decide, have the public give input to it, and walk through that process with the public. So, so that's our suggestion for that.
Can I interrupt you for 1 minute?
Say,
Can I interrupt?
Sure.
It was my hope, and maybe I'm misunderstanding you, is that we would have the joint meeting. We would kind of vet out where we are, we would give direction, and then you would go and do the heavy lifting with the Planning Commission, and either you or Byron would be coming back to us on a regular basis and reporting back what the Planning Commission has decided and how this thing is looking as you go forward.
We can do that, but ultimately policy in the general plan is the law. And so you have to ultimately make the decision on the policy as a board. And so it's our recommendation that the board and Planning Commission be on the same page, so you don't end up in a tennis match where Planning Commission is recommending one thing and the board goes, well, I don't like that, let's send it back to the Planning Commission, and then we all end up in this tennis match. So we found it more successful to bring the Planning Commission in with the board and sit down for a couple of hours, work through this, and we'll be done with it. What our hope is after the next hearing is to get direction from you to start the EIR, which means you're going to be on a fast-track timeline. I mean, the EIR is a long timeline anyway.
That sounds even better.
We're pushing the envelope to try to make this happen. Now, you may say, we didn't get through it, we need another workshop, but we'll make that decision when we get there.
Okay, well, that even sounds better. Okay, thank you.
All right.
Mr. Chair, I have a question on that workshop. Is it date-specific in March? Because this is if it's going to be fast-track, we need to put it in our calendars now. And so does the Planning Commission, so make sure everybody's here.
I have some suggestions towards the end of the presentation to do that. And actually, is this, I just want to make sure, yeah, we got the right one, so, okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Landowner requests, let's talk about that. And this is one of the direction points we do need from you today, along with actually setting a date for the workshop. So landowner requests, does the board want to include landowner requests at this time in the general plan? Landowner requests are not currently within our scope and budget. So I'll just be really clear about that up front. And we said that very clearly in our scope. Landowner requests have a trickle-down effect in everything you do. So if we decide to do something in the general plan, it's going to change the map. It'll change, potentially have a policy that goes with it, which could change the evaluation in the EIR, and it trickles down to the technical studies that are done and those types of things. We think some of that's fairly containable. It depends on what they are. So if you said, well, you know, I'm going to go out of the box for a second. So let's say we have an area that we want to designate, we want to change the land uses on it, and it's going to be a new community area, and we don't want to just designate it as a special study area. We want to designate it as a large, you know, development area. That might have an effect on traffic, air quality, GHG, et cetera. So I just want to be clear that it depends what the request is. You know, fairly small request, minor request, you know, and we can define what that is in a little bit, may not have a big effect. I say down at the bottom of this slide, you know, we estimate some of the things we've heard from the board and from staff maybe being in the $5,000 to $10,000 range per request. We don't know unless we know what they are. Some of the requests we've heard already are the Aromas request and the Tres Pinos request. I won't go through them, what they are specifically, but I think the board has talked about them more than once. We've also heard from Byron on Rocks Ranch, Highway 101 commercial area, Bettable Road area, racetrack, and then light industrial area. We also have a budget, a supplemental budget of $25,000 in our contract that you approved. So it's a $175,000 contract with $25,000 on top of that to handle any things that you make changes on later, right? And we also have in there that we'll give you a proposal, a scope and cost to handle landowner requests. So you could choose, and I've said this to Byron, you could choose, and I've said it to you before too, you could choose to use that $25,000 now. It's kind of like playing and saying, I'm going to use it now, but that means you better not use it later, right? You use it now to handle, you know, say up to 5 landowner requests because they cost $5,000 each, or up to 2 or 3 landowner requests because we can fit them in the $25,000. So it's just a choice you might want to make in terms of a budget direction for now.
Supervisor Patello?
Well, you know, it comes back to why should we pay for it? If we have a landowner request, why can't we pass that cost on to the landowner themselves? And they cover the costs. If they have a request, if they're requesting a zoning consideration for the general plan, perhaps they should pay for it.
Well, and I know that discussion has gone on, and I know Byron's had that discussion with you about there's no reason why people can't just bring an application and request a general plan amendment, et cetera. They could do it right now if they wanted to. I understand that approach. I know there was a couple of the first 2 requests, the Aromas and Tres Pinos requests, I know were debated heavily in the GPAC, and for some reason they got left out, and I don't really know the reasoning behind that. So, you know, we're both, Ashley and I are here to accommodate you in terms of what you want to do. You let us know what you want to do as a board. I'm sure the public will potentially weigh in on that and say, you know, you ought to consider this or that. Maybe GPAC members or planning commissioners will weigh in on that. But we want to know, and part of it is, and this is just my view of it, is if you said today, yeah, we want to consider landowner requests, then I would suggest that you advertise that ASAP, set a hearing 2-3 weeks from now, and bring people in for landowner requests, if that's what you want to do. They decided to do that in Monterey County when they did their general plan update, and there was 100 people lined up at the podium. So, you know, it's just kind of, you kind of don't know what you're going to get. You could get 2 people show up, or you could get 100 people show up. So.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, thank you so much. That was one of the issues that we had a while back, where some of the landowners came in and said that they were there from the get-go, and that their requests had not been considered. And I think we need to be cognizant of that and not put it back on their shoulders if they were there initially, had made a request, and it wasn't included. So I think, do we have a record of who those landowners are, so that we may consider that? This has to be very well planned, because we don't want to go through the process and then find out later that we did leave out some very critical
Right.
areas.
Thank you so much for saying that. I am really pushing you at this point to make that decision, because you do not want to make that decision after the EIR is underway.
That caused some of the problems that we're having.
Right. The dollar signs will just start going like this, right? And so I'll let Byron answer that question. My understanding from sitting in the hearings with you and what I've understood from the process is that those 2, and the reason we designated those 2 on this PowerPoint behind me, the Aromas and Tres Pinos, we heard about those 2 all through the process. So I'm here to accommodate you. I don't want to leave people out. If that was a mistake of the last general plan that came to you, if it was, I mean, I don't really know whether it was or wasn't, but if it was, we want to accommodate that. So we want to try to work with you to make that happen and make it as easy on you as possible.
I guess my comment is, you know, my understanding of the general plan update is supposed to be the 30,000-foot view. The Aromas Tres Pinos area, you know, if it's not 30,000, it's at least 15,000. The other 3, those are ground level. I'm sorry. You know, a racetrack, why would you be including a racetrack into your general plan update? So those I really have trouble with. The other one that's not on this list that I think was brought up towards the end was extending the wine trail overlay to the north part of the county.
Yeah, let me just
I
go.
I think that gets it back up to the 15,000 or 30,000 level.
Yeah,
but these 3 down here, I don't think are
That's actually in this one.
Okay, it is?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's already included, so we know that that's part of it.
Okay,
So that's going
all
to
right.
be handled.
Since maybe, I want to say 2008, since we began this process, planning has been collecting requests from landowners. People would come in and say, I want to be involved, I want my property changed, which they put it in writing. So we've been collecting requests, but no one has taken any action on it. The GPAC said, we don't want to look at specific requests from property owners. We want to kick that to the Planning Commission. We've never really gotten to the Planning Commission for the general plan, so now what we need to know is what to do about these requests that we've been collecting over the years.
Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair?
I'm sorry, yes, Supervisor Rivas.
Yeah, I just have a comment. I mean, from a cost perspective, I have a problem with all requests because, you know, it's going to come out of, it's going to impact our budget and our bottom line to get this done. And I see, you know, I appreciate the explanation to give me a better understanding of this process. Is sure, you know, when you know the two issues that were pointed out, Aromas and Tres Pinos, one is dealing with, I think, was it the heavy industrial issue, which in my opinion was a no-brainer. But the other one, the Tres Pinos, has to do with residential growth, which will have an impact on infrastructure, which will have an impact on traffic. But as far as other requests out there, you know, I'm not here to play a fairness card. Just because I know Jim West and he approached me, and the realtor, Mr. Noble, he approached me, approached all of us. I'm not here to play favorites. You know, sure, they're great people, but there are other people out there that may have a legitimate request, and we have to entertain all of those in the process to do it. Be sure, it should go through the Planning Commission. But at the same time, I mean, from a pure, you know, a dollars and cents perspective, I have a problem with all of this because this is going to drive up the cost considerably. So, you know, especially if we take it from a fairness perspective and we entertain all of these options, it's not going to be easy. So, thanks, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair, my understanding, a general plan is more of a general statement, not a specific statement. And for us to start giving specific statements, I don't think it's a good thing for our community. And then if we were to go to a case-by-case review, we're talking maybe by the next chairman's comes on board, will we ever approve a general plan? And to my understanding, we have a mandate where our current chairman wants to make sure he can, you know, brag about that once he's no longer chairman. So, you know, he'll beat us up if we don't, you know, comply with his wishes. So, I don't know if we can go on a case by case and all those things you out there in a container, Byron. Unless we're willing to commit more time and more money into it, I'm sorry. Unless we treat everyone the same and fair.
Supervisor Patello?
Yeah, I think Supervisor Rivas and Supervisor De La Cruz have it right on this. Maybe we're at the point where we don't consider any more landowner requests. We have to treat everybody the same. If we consider one, we'll have to consider a bunch more. And we're at the point now that this thing has been driving on. And you know, it opens up the door of an unknown expenditure. And you know, in the case of in Aromas, that's a pretty big landowner out there. They could probably fund, if they have a project they want to move forward, they could probably fund a zone change through a general plan amendment. It's not like it's closing the door completely. The other items here, I think the chairman hit it on the nose, is that you know, they're very low-level projects like bettable area racetrack. Well, I could tell you I'm against that 100% already, but that's besides the point. It's too narrowed down to you know, specific type of projects that should be, you know, we have highway commercial. We identified those areas early on, and those, I think that included the Rocks Road Ranch out on 101 and Bettable being a highway commercial and some of the key intersections. That should be there already. If it's not, we better retract suing the previous consultant because it's there. And But as far as taking additional requests, I think we're opening a can of worms.
Okay, Supervisor Patella, just one clarification. So you're saying we should just not consider any of these 5? Is that what I'm hearing from you?
That's the way I feel about it
Okay.
at the moment.
Now, what about the wine trail overlay to the north part of the county? 'Cause apparently that was thrown in kind of a different...
I believe it's already in, so.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
So
I
it's
think
a
that did make
non-issue.
its way into the plan.
Mr. Chair.
It made it in as your direction to have us put it in.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh.
So you already directed us. If it's not in, it's already directed by us to put
Okay,
it in.
so
I
it's
haven't gone and looked at it.
basically a non-issue.
Yeah, I mean, what,
So the industrial zoning for Aromas did not make it in at the same time. It was
Well,
discussed at about the same
yeah,
time.
what I would like to do is have you give us direction to go double-check these to make sure what's in and what's not.
Okay, that's
Just
my question, Mr. Chair.
Because my understanding is Aromas is not in, and Tres Pinos is not in, and the wine quarter was directed by you to have us put it in.
Yes, I remember.
Not us, but have the consultant put it in. So, and now we are going to take that over and put that in as a part of it. So that's part of what we will do. We will do that. The Aromas and Tres Pinos, though, as far as I know, were not in, and they're not part of our current scope to put them in. So,
Mr. Chair, one comment. Byron, you made a comment that you have
Getting to be like Robbie now.
probably boxfuls of requests from landowners, right?
It's not quite that many, but.
But you have
we've been
more
collecting
than
them.
what is listed here.
Yes, yes.
Okay, now, if we consider one request, my recommendation is that we need to consider them all. If they came to any meeting and made a request at that time, even though they were not considered at the time, that's the same, if you take one, you have to take them all. So we really need to think that one out very carefully.
Mr. Chair, I've been raising my hands for the last couple of minutes.
Yes.
This is what I want you, Mr. Chair, or us, we the board or staff, tell me what mechanisms that we're going to use to allow them to pass through the door. Is it a verbal say? Is it a date? Is it a start date? Is it a document? Is it when they have an interest? Because we can define that in many different ways, and it's going to cost a lot of money, and I guarantee you someone's going to say that is not fair.
Yes, I agree.
That's right. That's the problem.
just a comment, and obviously, all of this discussion affects the timeline. So no landowner requests means we're going quickly. Landowner requests is going to slow things down depending on what you get, and it's also going to cost more money depending on what you get. And I concur with the board that the only way to do that process is to open it up. You can't say one or the other unless there's some evidence that Aromas and Tres Pinos were directed by the board at some future point. Although Ashley and I have looked through, I think, all of the minutes that we could find and all of the information that we've gotten so far and haven't found that as a direction. Am I correct from your perspective as well? So we left that off because we put it on as a special note that it was discussed, but we didn't get any, we didn't see any direction that that should be included. You know, honestly, just in front of everybody, I think it was a mistake that this issue wasn't brought up 2 years ago, right? And part of the GPAC process, part of the Planning Commission, I agree with you, the Planning Commission should have been taking this and looking at that process. But that's just a mistake that the other consultants maybe just didn't, maybe they didn't feel that the board wanted to do that or whatever it was. Maybe it just was never discussed. You know, the other consultant team worked hard on getting to this to where it is. So, and I think the document is a good document and we can take it from here to the goal line. But this is a missing piece, and I've mentioned it to the board several times.
I have a request from the public to kind of comment on this.
I'd like to ask a question about the public notice for this discussion. Several people who have an interest on these certain projects are not here in the audience. People who have given Byron applications, et cetera, have been told to wait. This, by the way, this does not affect San Juan Oaks at all, but I know this is true. Have been told to wait for a future decision about this as to whether things would be coming forward or not. you're discussing it now as if you're potentially going to make a decision today and say yes or no to these new projects. I don't see how you can do that without, well, I'm asking the question, can you do that without a better adequate public notice that you're going to make this decision today? Because I don't think people who have been going along this whole process all this time and have their project maybe in, maybe out, we don't know, we'll tell you later, are now going to be told no, and they're not here. So I just thought I'd bring that up.
Okay. So I'm going to look to County Council.
So the matter was agendized to just simply receive a progress report. So that's all the board can do today is receive the report.
So you're saying we cannot take any kind of action?
No substantive action, no.
Okay.
So.
And if you remember what I said earlier, is that if you were going to take a direction on this, that you actually schedule it on a hearing and take a direction, okay? So if there's something that you want to do with regard to landowner requests, please schedule it soon. Advertise it, give a couple of weeks or whatever's necessary. You need at least 10 days, obviously, but in a couple of weeks, and let people speak to the issue. But we need that decision post haste. So, okay. Let me just move on so I don't run into your 1 o'clock. We mentioned Hatchmont McDonald. There was some discussion about the traffic analysis all the way back to the assumptions and modeling. That's been kicked back and forth, and there's been a lot of discussion by the board and staff on that. We are going to bring them in to do a review of the traffic analysis and the modeling, et cetera, and get some input from them. We also brought in Ascent, even though our office does air quality and greenhouse gas analysis. It had something to do with cows. So that was just a little joke. But
I was going to ask, we're going to be able to keep our cows, right?
Has something to do with cows, and so we decided we would bring in a firm. We know what the issue is, and we know that there's a different approach to that than was taken. So we brought in another firm that does a lot of this work as well, and they're going to co-work with us on coming up with the analysis for this, and I think, and I hope in the end of the day you'll be very happy with that analysis. So just wanted to bring that up. This is the timeline and schedule. Our notice to proceed, January 16th, kickoff today. We're hoping to have this joint Board of Supervisors Planning Commission workshop in March, finalize the revisions to the draft general plan in April, have the review of the traffic peer review in May, and then do our air quality analysis. Those things, as you might know or might not know, can't run simultaneously. They have to go one before the other. And we can't do the traffic until we get the board to say we're good with the general plan. We have to fix it. So it's like fixing a project description. We fix it, then we do the traffic analysis, et cetera. And then we'll finalize the EIR based on whatever changes we've made to the general plan and the review of traffic and air quality and any changes that are made there. And then we'll go out to public review for CEQA, and as you can see, the timeline flows on to October for response to comments, November, looking at bringing it to Planning Commission and Board for a recommendation in November, December. You should have it by the end of the year, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
This is a handout that we have that is a little bit of a detailed handout, and the reason I did this is just a cheat sheet for you and for the public. So if you want to see it on a stepwise process, step 1, step 2, step 3 through step 9, it kind of gives you the basic things that we're doing in each one of the steps. And if anybody asks you any questions from the public, you have a little cheat sheet that basically says, here's what's happening in the process. And then implementation of post-September 9th Board of Supervisors policy direction for incorporation in the revised EIR. I mentioned that $25,000 budget. We have a budget set aside in case something crazy comes up that needs to come from the board after we're already started in the EIR process, which, as life is, it always throws you some kind of curveball, so we'll probably get something. But and then we have additional things that are not funded at this point in time, which would be anything else that comes up. If there's more hearings that you want than are in our scope, if there's other revisions to the EIR, or map diagrams or things that you want to change later after we've already gone down the road. And then the last piece is something you will need to do and think about probably soon as you go into budgeting, is step 4, which is the implementation of the general plan policies. It usually happens through zoning and other policies and ordinances. And we're currently doing all the implementation ordinances for the County of Monterey on their general plan update after 12 or 13 years of them fighting over that general plan and finally getting it adopted. They hired us to do the implementation. So we're familiar with that process and want to encourage you to be thinking about that ahead of time. The last piece is to set a date. You know, I want to see if there's any other comments the board may have before we leave here today, just so we have any other direction that you might want to make sure we consider as a part of the process. And then set a board date with the Planning Commission for the following items: policy revision review. So it's the thing you were handed out today. And again, I want to emphasize this to everybody, is a work in progress. This is not the end game. We haven't even reviewed all of the comments yet. We're in the middle of that process, but we reviewed some of them. So it's a work in progress. You do have a sheet that you can, a little cheat sheet that shows you all the comments that were received during the process. So use that so if you want to go back and look anything up. And then we want to go over the narratives, which we will be working hard to craft over the next 30 days. We want to make sure you give us a direction on landowner requests sometime in the next 2 to 3 weeks. And then we would like any other items or issues you want us to present during that period of time, and then give us direction at the next workshop and have it agendized so you can give us direction to proceed with the EIR if we're complete. Okay? I'm available for any questions. Ashley's available. Byron's got my back. So.
Okay, we've kind of gone over it a little bit. Let me open it up to the public real quick, see if there's anybody has anything to ask or comment additional. Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board. Do we want to set a meeting date now, or do we want to have, okay?
I think we should discuss the meeting date, but probably the 12th would be a little too soon if we were to make a decision whether or not we're to take the landowner requests. And I know that, Mike, you want it preferred, but I think that's really, really important for us to make that decision going into it.
Mm-hmm. And you see the little, Mr. Chairman, through the chair, you see the little note at the bottom on the screen here. The little note at the bottom says, if landowner requests are included, the workshop date will likely have to be the 26th. It could be the 19th, but